Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto joins the fairy tale guild and gets a harem with Lucy, Juvia and Cana? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. A sky of a different blue. The first thing he tasted was salt. It was coarse and sharp on his tongue, a gritty contrast to the coppery tang of blood that had been his world only moments, or was it lifetimes, ago. The second was the air. It was thick, heavy with moisture and the scent of something blooming, a sweet, cloying fragrance entirely alien to him. It filled his lungs with a clean fire, a shocking sensation after the ash and ozone of a battlefield where gods had clashed. Naruto Uzumaki's eyes cracked open. The sky was a searing, impossible blue, a shade deeper and more vibrant than any he had ever known. A lone, fluffy cloud drifted lazily across his vision, its edges tinged with a faint, golden light that seemed to pulse with a gentle energy. He pushed himself up on one elbow, his muscles screaming in protest. Every fiber of his being felt both hollowed out and stretched thin, like a drum skin pulled too taut. The sand beneath him was warm and white, a stark contrast to the churned, blackened earth he remembered. He looked down at his hands. They were his own, calloused and scarred from a lifetime of war, but the faint, shimmering glow of the Six Paths Sage Mode was gone. He could still feel the power, the immense reservoir of chakra that had become a part of his very soul, but it was different now. It was quiet. The roaring inferno had settled into a deep, steady hearthfire, banked and waiting. Kurama was there, a rumbling, comforting presence in the back of his mind, but he too was silent, conserving his strength, observing. "Where are we?" The fox's voice was a low growl, devoid of its usual snark. Naruto didn't answer. He didn't have one. He scanned the horizon. A vast, turquoise ocean stretched out before him, its waves collapsing on the shore with a gentle, rhythmic sigh. To his left, a port town bustled with color and life, its buildings a strange amalgamation of timber and brightly painted plaster. Strange, four-wheeled contraptions that weren't carts moved without horses. And the people, their clothes were bizarre, their hair a riot of unnatural colors. It was the energy, though, that truly set him on edge. It wasn't chakra, it was something else, a wild, untamed force that saturated the very air he was breathing. It clung to the people, the buildings, even the light itself. He staggered to his feet, his worn black pants and the tattered remnants of his orange jacket clinging to him. The final moments of the fight with Sasuke were a fractured mosaic in his mind. The raw power of their final clash, the screech of reality tearing, a blinding, all-consuming light, and then, this suffocating peace. He had won. He had kept his promise to Sakura. He had brought Sasuke back. But in the process, it seemed he had lost everything else. With a heavy heart and a weariness that went bone deep, he started walking toward the town. He needed information, food, and a place to simply be. He moved with a slow, deliberate gait, his senses on high alert. The stares he received were fleeting, curious glances at his strange, torn attire, but no one seemed to recognize the symbol on the shattered remnants of his headband, which he quickly pocketed. He was a ghost here, a nobody. The thought was strangely liberating. The town, Harem, was a cacophony of sounds and smells. Fishmongers hawked their wares, children laughed as they chased strangely colored birds, and from a central plaza, a crowd's roar drew his attention. A large group, mostly young women, had gathered around a man with garish purple hair. He was preening, flashing rings on his fingers that pulsed with a faint, sickly sweet energy. "Yes, it is I, the great salamander of fairy tale," the man declared, his voice dripping with manufactured charm. Naruto felt a slight pressure against his mind, a gentle, insidious suggestion to like this man, to admire him. He blinked, and the feeling was gone, repelled by the sheer density of his own chakra. He looked closer, his eyes narrowing. He saw the energy flowing from one of the man's rings, a simple but effective charm that preyed on the desire for affection. Pathetic. He was about to turn away, dismissing it as a local annoyance, when he saw her. A young woman with blonde hair tied to one side, her brown eyes wide with a star-struck wonder that seemed just a little too forced. She was clutching a book to her chest, Her expression one of someone desperately trying to believe in magic. Something about her, a flicker of genuine hope in a cloud of manufactured awe, held his attention. Then the purple-haired man's eyes landed on her. You, my dear, he oozed. You have the spark. I am having a party on my yacht tonight. You simply must be my guest of honor. The girl, Lucy, seemed to snap out of it for a moment, a flash of skepticism in her eyes. Oh, I don't know. The charm intensified, and her resistance melted away. Okay, she chirped, her voice unnaturally high. Naruto sighed. He was tired. He wanted nothing more than to find a dark corner and be left alone. But he had spent his entire life fighting to protect the smiles of people he didn't know. Old habits died hard. He started walking forward, his steps silent. He didn't push through the crowd. The crowd simply seemed to part for him, an unconscious reaction to the pressure he emanated. He came to a stop directly in front of the blonde girl, Ching himself between her and the so-called salamander. The magic in that ring is fading, Naruto said, his voice quiet but carrying with absolute clarity over the din. You should get it recharged before it fails completely. The man, Bora, sputtered. Who do you think you are? Do you have any idea who I am? His fan club of enchanted women began to hiss and boo, their faces contorted in anger. Naruto ignored them. He looked at the blonde girl. He's using a charm spell. An illegal one. Look closely at the ring, not at him. Forced to focus, Lucy's eyes cleared. She saw the cheap, glowing trinket for what it was. And the spell shattered. Her face flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and anger. Hey, you were trying to trick me. The crowd's adoration wavered as the spell broke for all of them. Bora's face twisted into a snarl. You've made a powerful enemy, boy. I am a mage of fairy tale. No, you're not, Naruto stated, not as an accusation, but as a simple fact. Your energy is shallow. It's full of pride and greed. It doesn't feel like it belongs to a family. The word, family, hung in the air. For a moment, Naruto's own loss washed over him, a cold tide of grief. He pushed it down. That's it, Bora roared, thrusting his hands forward. Prominence typhoon. A torrent of garish purple fire erupted, swirling towards Naruto. It was hot, loud, and utterly unimpressive. Naruto didn't move. He didn't even raise a hand. He just stood there as the flames washed over him. The crowd screamed. Lucy cried out his name, though she didn't even know it. The fire vanished as quickly as it came. Naruto stood completely unharmed, his tattered clothes not even singed. A faint, almost invisible shimmer of golden energy around him faded away. He looked at Bora with an expression of profound disappointment. That's all? He asked. Before Bora or his hired thugs could react, Naruto moved. It wasn't the blinding flash of a body flicker, just a single, economical step that seemed to cover the distance in an instant. He didn't punch. He simply placed his open palm on Bora's chest. A wave of pure, condensed energy, not chakra, not magic, but something in between, pulsed from his hand. It wasn't violent. It was absolute. Bora's eyes went wide with shock as the air was forced from his lungs. He and his entire entourage of thugs were lifted from their feet and thrown backwards, tumbling through the air in a perfect, silent arc before landing in a heap 50 feet away, completely unconscious. The plaza fell silent. The only sound was the distant cry of gulls. Naruto stood alone in the space he had cleared, his hand still slightly outstretched. He hadn't broken a sweat. He hadn't even looked angry. He just looked tired. Lucy stared, her jaw agape. She had seen magic all her life. She had seen mages fight. She had never seen anything like that. It was so quiet, so controlled, so final. You saved me, she stammered, finally finding her voice. Thank you. That was amazing. What was that? Are you a famous mage? My name is Lucy Heartfilia, by the way. Naruto turned to her, the intensity in his eyes softening. He offered a small, weary smile. It was nothing. He was a bully. He looked around the now dispersing crowd, his gaze distant. My name is Naruto. Well, Naruto, I owe you one. Let me treat you to lunch. She insisted, grabbing his arm with an enthusiasm that was both startling and, surprisingly, not unwelcome. He allowed himself to be led away, the warmth of her hand on his arm a small, human anchor in this strange new world. Over a meal he devoured with a speed that astonished her. Lucy talked. She talked about her dream of joining a famous wizard guild, and how Fairy Tail was the best of the best. She described it as a place that was a little crazy, a little destructive. But more than anything, it was a family. That word again. Family. They sound nice, Naruto said, the word feeling foreign on his tongue. Nice. They're the strongest, most amazing, most chaotic guild in all of Fury. She gushed. Then she paused, looking at him with a sudden, brilliant idea in her eyes. Wait a minute, you took out Bora like he was nothing. You're super strong. Are you looking for a guild? Naruto considered it. He had nowhere to go. No home to return to. These people, this guild, they fought for each other. They called each other family. It was a pale imitation of the bonds he had forged, the village he had sworn to protect, but it was something. It was a start. Maybe, he said, and for the first time, Lucy saw a genuine spark of something other than weariness in his amber eyes. Where is this place? The journey to Magnolia was filled with Lucy's incessant, cheerful chatter. Naruto found it oddly comforting. She asked questions he couldn't answer. About where he was from, what kind of magic he used, how he got so strong. He gave her vague, simple truths. I came from a place that was destroyed in a war. It's not really magic. It's just me. I trained a lot. She was a celestial wizard, she explained, showing him her gate keys with pride. She spoke of the spirits not as tools, but as friends. He understood that. He thought of the toads of Mount Myoboku, of the bonds he shared with the tailed beasts. Her loyalty to her friends, even ones she hadn't made yet, resonated with him. When they finally arrived, the Fairy Tail Guild Hall was exactly as she had described it. Loud, chaotic, and radiating a powerful, if untamed, energy. The building itself looked more like a tavern that had survived a dozen wars. Before they could even step inside, the doors burst open and a half-naked man with dark blue hair went flying out, landing in a heap at their feet. Gray, you bastard, get back here and finish this. A voice roared from inside. A boy with pink hair and a scarf that looked like dragon scales stormed out, his fists wreathed in flames. You started it, Flame Brain. The man, Gray, shouted back, scrambling to his feet and slamming his fists together. Ice Make. Hammer. Fire Dragon's Iron Fist. Naruto watched the clash of fire and ice with a detached curiosity. Their control was sloppy, their power raw and unfocused, but their spirit, that he recognized. It was the fierce, unwavering spirit of rivalry that pushed two people to greater heights. It reminded him, painfully, of Sasuke. Lucy just sighed, a look of fond exasperation on her face. Welcome to Fairy Tail. They stepped inside, and the chaos multiplied. A massive man with white hair was shouting about being a real man. A buxom woman with quali white hair was polishing a glass behind the bar, a serene smile on her face as a chair flew past her head. Barrels of ale were stacked to the ceiling, and a red-haired woman in armor was eating a slice of cake with grim determination. And everywhere, people were fighting, laughing, and drinking. Naruto's presence, quiet and unassuming, went almost completely unnoticed in the maelstrom. Lucy tried to lead him to the bar, but was immediately swept up in the brawl. Naruto, however, remained untouched. He didn't dodge or weave. The chaos simply seemed to flow around him, like a river parting around a great, unmovable stone. He saw the woman behind the bar, Miragen, look at him, her smile faltering for just a second as she tried to gauge the quiet stranger Lucy had brought in. He saw the armored woman, Urza, glance up from her cake, her sharp eyes assessing him in an instant before dismissing him as a non-threat. And from a card-strewn table in the corner, he felt another gaze, sharper and more appraising. A woman with long brown hair, clad in a revealing halter top and chaps, held a tankard of ale in one hand and a set of cards in the other. She watched him over the rim of her mug, a slow, curious smirk playing on her lips. Cana. The fight was escalating, as it was apparently wont to do. Natsu had Gray in a headlock, Elfman had body slammed another guild member through a table, and a stray barrel, sent flying by an errant spell, was tumbling end over end directly towards Miragen at the bar. Urza's eyes widened. Natsu and Gray stopped fighting, their faces paling. Everyone seemed to realize, a second too late, that the line had been crossed. But the barrel never landed. It stopped, dead in the air, a foot from Mirajan's head. It just hung there, motionless, every drop of ale within it frozen in place. A collective gasp swept through the guild hall. Every eye turned to the source of the impossible stillness. Naruto stood 10 feet away, his hand raised, palm open towards the barrel. He hadn't moved from his spot. He hadn't uttered a word. A pressure, immense and absolute, descended upon the room. It wasn't malicious. It was just heavy. It felt like the air itself had turned to stone, pressing down on them, demanding silence. Natsu, Gray, Elfman, everyone was forced to their knees by the sheer, overwhelming weight of his presence. It wasn't an attack. It felt more like a law of nature had suddenly been imposed upon them. He was a mountain, and they were pebbles at its base. He lowered his hand. The pressure vanished. The barrel clattered harmlessly to the floor. The silence that followed was more profound than any noise that had come before it. Everyone, from the rowdiest brawler to the most seasoned veteran, stared at him with a mixture of shock, awe, and a healthy dose of fear. Naruto simply walked to the bar, stepping around the now kneeling combatants as if they were nothing more than furniture. He addressed the stunned Mirajan with a polite, calm voice. "Sorry about the mess. Is the master in?" A tiny, wizened old man who had been perched on the bar, unnoticed, hopped down. He looked up at Naruto, his expression unreadable. This was Makarov Dreyar, the guild master. "I am," Makarov said, his voice surprisingly deep and powerful. He studied Naruto for a long moment. He didn't just see a young man. He saw a veteran. He saw a power so vast it was terrifying, but a spirit so controlled it was humbling. And beneath it all, he saw a sorrow so deep it threatened to drown worlds. "You carry a heavy burden, son," Makarov said, his voice softening. Naruto's shoulders slumped almost imperceptibly. "You have no idea. This place," Makarov gestured to the silent, kneeling guild members, "is a home for children like you. Children who have lost their way. Who carry burdens too great to bear alone. It is loud. It is destructive. But it is a family. And in a family, we share the load." Naruto looked at the faces around him. He saw Natsu, still on his knees, staring with wide, incredulous eyes. He saw Gray, looking more confused than intimidated. He saw Lucy, beaming with pride. He saw Cana, her smirk replaced by a look of intense, unadulterated interest. He saw 100 different people, all of them broken or lost in some way, who had found a home here. A genuine, small smile touched his lips. "I'd like to join." Makarov's face split into a wide grin. "Mirajan." The stamp. Mirajan, shaking off her shock, hurried over with the guild's magical stamp. "Where would you like it? And what color?" Naruto thought for a moment. He pushed up the tattered sleeve of his right arm. "Here," he said, indicating his shoulder. "Black." As Mira pressed the stamp to his skin, the dark, swirling symbol of a fairy's tale appeared. It pulsed with a warm energy, a tangible connection to everyone else in the room. It felt right. He was no longer just Naruto Uzumaki, the hero of the leaf, the child of prophecy. He was Naruto of fairy tale. The tension in the room finally broke. Natsu shot to his feet, his earlier awe replaced by boundless excitement. "All right, you're super strong. Fight me." Before Naruto could even respond, Urza's armored fist slammed into the top of Natsu's head, driving him face first into the floorboards. "Show some respect, Natsu. He is a new member of our family," she boomed, before turning to Naruto with a nod. "Welcome to Fairy Tail. I am Urza." "I'm Gray," the other brawler said, now fully dressed again. "Don't mind him. He's an idiot." "What did you say, you popsicle?" Natsu roared, his head popping out of the hole in the floor. And just like that, the chaos resumed. But this time, it was different. It was directed away from Naruto, a tacit acknowledgement of the power in their midst. He found himself at a table with Lucy, who immediately began explaining the guild's rules or lack thereof. Soon, they were joined by Cana, who plonked 2 massive tankards of ale on the table with a thud. "All right, newcomer," Cana said, her eyes sparkling with challenge. "You stopped a barrel with your brain and made Natsu and Gray kneel without touching them. That deserves a drink. But let's see if you can keep up with a real fairy tale mage. Quote. Naruto looked at the frothing tankard, then at her confident smirk. He thought of the rigorous training with Jiraiya, the potent poisons he had built an immunity to, and the monstrous metabolism granted by the fox sealed within him. He simply nodded and took the mug. Okay. The contest was legendary before it was even over. Cana, the undisputed drinking champion of the guild, threw back mug after mug with practiced ease. To everyone's astonishment, Naruto matched her, pint for pint. He wasn't boisterous or competitive. He just drank, his expression calm, his hand steady. As the hours passed and the pile of empty tankards grew into a small mountain, it was Cana who started to waver. Her movements became slower, her smirk a little more forced. Naruto, however, remained perfectly composed, his amber eyes as clear as when he had first walked in. He wasn't drunk. He wasn't even tipsy. Finally, Cana slammed her 15th mug down, sloshing ale onto the table. She stared at him, her eyes wide. How are you even conscious? I have a high tolerance, Naruto said simply, finishing his own mug and setting it down gently. Cana stared at him for another second before a loud, genuine laugh burst out of her. I like you, Naruto, she declared, clapping him on the shoulder. You're full of surprises. She respected power, and this, in its own way, was a display of power as impressive as what he'd done earlier. She had met her match, and she was thrilled. From across the guild, Juvia Cana watched the spectacle. Her attention, usually devoted solely to her beloved Gray, had been snagged by the newcomer. She had seen him arrive. She had felt the crushing pressure that had brought even her to a knee. And now, she was watching him drink the Cana Alberona, under the table without even trying. Gray was trying to pick a fight with a table and Natsu was attempting to eat fire from a torch. They were powerful, her darling Gray was the most powerful, of course. But this man, he was different. He was quiet, still, like the deep ocean. She found herself watching him, a flicker of something she couldn't name, curiosity, perhaps then a hint of apprehension, stirring within her. For now, it was just a passing observation. Her heart belonged to Gray, but she would be watching the whirlpool that had just landed in their little pond. As the night wound down and the guild's energy finally began to ebb, Naruto excused himself. He found a set of stairs leading to the roof and stepped out into the cool night air. The sky above Magnolia was clear, dotted with stars arranged in constellations he had never seen. A shattered moon hung in the inky blackness, a painful reminder that this was not his world. He sat on the edge of the roof, his legs dangling over the side, and looked out over the sleeping town. The ache of his loss was a physical thing, a hollow space in his chest that echoed with the ghosts of his friends, his teachers, his home. He had saved his world, but he could never go back. He felt the guild's mark on his shoulder, a faint warmth against his skin. He heard the faint sounds of laughter and singing from below. It wasn't Konoha. It would never be Konoha. But it was something. A place of chaos and madness, of fierce loyalty and unconditional acceptance. A place where a monster, a hero, a stranger, could be welcomed as family. For the first time since he had woken up on that white sand beach, Naruto Uzumaki felt a flicker of something he thought he had lost forever in the blinding light of that final battle. Hope. But as he slept on that roof, under a sky of a different blue, a faint, distorted echo of a long-defeated will stirred in the void between worlds. Kagaya Otsutsuki was gone, erased by his and Sasuke's hands. But an infinitesimal fragment of her hatred, her ambition, cast adrift in the dimensional tear, sensed the massive, alien energy of Earth-land. It was a beacon in the darkness. Drawn by the scent of power, the remnant began to drift, to pull itself together, seeking a new host, a new world to shape into a perfect, silent, obedient garden. It was a whisper now, a forgotten ghost, but it was patient. And it was hungry. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The Whispers of a Water Woman. A month slid by in a haze of boisterous normalcy. Naruto found a rhythm in the madness of fairy tale. He discovered that the guild took on jobs from a request board, a simple system of helping people for jewels that he found refreshingly straightforward after a lifetime of convoluted, life-or-death missions. He took the simple ones at first, tracking down lost pets, dealing with minor monsters in the nearby woods, helping a farmer reinforce his magical storage silo. He did them with an efficiency that was almost comical. A job meant to take a team 2 days was finished by a single shadow clone in under an hour, leaving the original Naruto free to sit on the guild's roof, observing the strange, vibrant world he now inhabited. He learned the guild's unspoken rules. He learned that Urza's strawberry cake was sacrosanct. He learned that Natsu would challenge anything that moved to a fight, and that Gray would inevitably get drawn into it. He learned that Kana's good mood was directly proportional to the amount of ale available, and that Lucis rent was a source of constant, existential dread. He became a quiet fixture, a point of calm in the hurricane. He'd offer a quiet word of advice to a younger member struggling with a spell, reinforce a table Natsu had just shattered with a touch of chakra-infused wood, or simply listen as Lucy lamented her latest manuscript rejection. He never joined the brawls. It wasn't arrogance or distaste. He simply saw no point in them. To him, fighting was a tool, a final, bloody resort for when words and reason failed. This casual, almost friendly violence was alien. Natsu, unable to comprehend this, challenged him daily. The result was always the same. Naruto would sidestep, parry, or simply dissipate a fiery punch with a flick of his wrist, never once launching an attack of his own, until the Dragon Slayer wore himself out. "You're no fun," Natsu would pout, covered in soot and exhaustion. "Fighting without a purpose is just a waste of energy," Naruto would reply, his voice calm, before offering the pink-haired mage a hand up. It was his quiet competence that led Lucy to his table one sun-drenched morning, a fresh request form in her hand. "Naruto," she began, her brown eyes bright with purpose, "Team Natsu has a new job. Urza thinks it's a big one. I want you to come with us." He looked up from the bowl of ramen Mirajan had somehow learned to make for him. "Why?" "Because you see things we don't," she said, her voice dropping a little. "You're steady. With Natsu and Gray trying to kill each other and Urza trying to keep them from killing each other, we need someone steady." Before he could answer, Urza's armored form loomed over their table. "I agree," she stated, her voice brooking no argument. "I have not yet seen your capabilities in a true mission environment. This would be an adequate test. The client is in Oshariman, a town down the coast. The pay is substantial. People have been falling into comas, their spirits seemingly drained." Naruto's eyes narrowed. Drained spirits. It sounded uncomfortably like something Orochimaru might have dabbled in. A dark guild was the obvious culprit. "All right," he said, pushing his empty bowl aside. "I'll go." As they prepared to leave, a flash of blue caught his eye. Juvia Cana was practically vibrating with nervous energy, clutching a small bag to her chest. If Gray-sama is going on a mission, then Juvia must go too. To offer support, she declared to anyone who would listen. Though her eyes were fixed on the back of Gray's head, Gray sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. "Juvia, it could be dangerous. You should stay here." Her face fell, and for a second, the air in the guild seemed to grow heavier, more humid. "But Juvia is strong too." "He's not saying you're weak," Naruto said, his voice cutting through the tension. He walked over, his expression unreadable. "He's saying he's worried you'll get hurt." "Right." He gave Gray a pointed look. Gray blinked, caught off guard. Right. Yeah, that's it." Juvia's entire demeanor changed. A blush bloomed on her cheeks, and her eyes turned into hearts. Gray-sama worries for Juvia. Oh, this is the happiest day of her life. Juvia will pack more snacks for her beloved. She scurried away, lost in a world of her own. Lucy giggled. "Wow, Naruto, you're actually pretty good at that. Understanding people isn't that hard," he said quietly, his gaze lingering on Juvia's retreating form. Quote, "You just have to listen to what they're not saying." Oshariman was a town drowning in sorrow. A thick, oppressive mist clung to the cobblestone streets, muffling sound and chilling the air despite the midday sun. The few people they saw moved with a slow, joyless shuffle, their eyes vacant. It was a place without laughter. Their client, the town's mayor, was a man whose face seemed permanently etched with worry. "It started 2 weeks ago," he explained, his voice a weary rasp. "First, it was just 1 or 2, found in their beds, breathing but empty. Now, dozens have succumbed. They just lie there, lost in some endless nightmare. The local mages are useless. Whatever this is, it's beyond them. Urza nodded grimly. A dark guild is almost certainly to blame. They are likely feeding on the victim's magical energy. They began their investigation, splitting up to cover more ground. Naruto, paired with Lucy, found himself walking through the silent streets. He closed his eyes, extending his senses. He couldn't feel chakra, but he could feel the flow of the world's natural energy. Here, it was stagnant, choked by a palpable miasma of despair. It feels wrong, he murmured. This whole town, the energy is sick. I feel it too, Lucy said, rubbing her arms. It's like all the happiness has been sucked out of the air. It makes me want to find a corner and cry for no reason. It was then that Naruto felt it. A faint, almost undetectable pulse of energy from the cliffs overlooking the town. It was slick and insidious, like oil spreading over water. There, he said, his eyes snapping open. That's the source. He and Lucy regrouped with the others, including Juvia, who had stubbornly followed Gray. Naruto pointed towards the cliffs. The one we're looking for is in a cave up there. The entrance is concealed by some kind of illusion. Natsu grinned, cracking his knuckles. An illusion. I'll just burn the whole cliff down. No, Naruto said, his voice firm. A direct assault is what he'll be expecting. We don't know what we're dealing with. We go in quiet. They found the cave mouth hidden behind a shimmering curtain of mist that looked like solid rock. As they stepped through, the feeling of despair intensified tenfold. The cave was a single, large cavern, eerily empty save for a lone figure sitting cross-legged in the center. He was a slender man with silver hair and eyes that were closed in meditation. He wore simple, elegant robes and radiated an aura of absolute tranquility that was a terrifying contrast to the emotional poison filling the air. So, the flies have found my web, the man said without opening his eyes. His voice was calm, melodic. I am Morpheus, and I am afraid you have come at a most inconvenient time. I am feasting. Feasting. On what? Urza demanded, reequipping into her Heaven's Wheel armor. On the truth, Morpheus replied, a serene smile on his face. All I do is help people see it. Happiness is a fleeting illusion. Joy is a temporary lie we tell ourselves to ward off the inevitable darkness. The only truth is sorrow. The only peace is despair. I simply guide them to it. You're just a creep who's making people sick. Natsu roared, lunging forward. Fire dragons roar. A massive torrent of flame blasted towards the seated figure. But it never hit. The fire dissipated a few feet from Morpheus, dissolving into harmless embers as if its very will to burn had been extinguished. Morpheus opened his eyes. They were a soft, gentle lilac, and they seemed to look straight through Natsu and into his soul. A dragon's fire is powerful, he said softly. But what powers the dragon? A broken promise. A lost father. An endless, lonely search. Natsu froze. The image of Igneal's back as he flew away filled his mind, so vivid it felt real. The pain, the abandonment, it swamped him, a tidal wave of grief that buckled his knees. He fell to the cavern floor, his flames extinguished, his body trembling. Natsu, Gray shouted, alarmed. Ice make. Lance. Dozens of icy spears shot towards Morpheus. He didn't even flinch. He simply turned his lilac gaze on Gray. Ice is cold, but it is not as cold as the guilt you carry. The guilt of a master sacrificed. A friend lost. A promise you couldn't keep. Gray cried out as the image of her body turning to ice to seal Deliora, flooded his senses. The memory was a shard of ice in his heart, and Morpheus's magic twisted it, magnified it, until the guilt was a crushing weight. He too collapsed, clutching his head. This is not simple illusion magic, Urza snarled, advancing, sword spinning. It is a direct assault on the heart. The heart is so very fragile, Titania, Morpheus whispered. His gaze met hers. A tower built on the bones of children. A paradise of lies. Desperate need for a family to replace the one you lost, even as you fear you will only lead them to their doom, just like the last time. Urza's assault faltered. Her swords clattered to the ground. As she was mentally thrown back into the dark, damp cells of the Tower of Heaven, a terrified, helpless child once more. Lucy watched in horror as her strongest friends were taken down without a single physical blow. Open. Gate of the Lion. Loke. Loke appeared in a flash of golden light, but as he moved to attack, Morpheus's voice washed over him. You would fight for a master you almost killed. A friend whose life you shortened with your own selfish exile. Loke staggered back, the light of his Regulus magic flickering. Lucy. It's okay. Loke, close. Lucy commanded, tears in her eyes as she sent her suffering spirit back. Morpheus's serene smile never wavered. He had defeated the strongest members of Team Natsu by turning their own hearts against them. His gaze swept the room and finally settled on Juvia, who had been standing at the back, trembling. Ah, he said, his voice soft with a predator's delight. And then there is you. The Rain Woman. So much potential. So much truth. Juvia flinched as if struck. All your life, the rain has followed you, Morpheus crooned, his voice echoing in her mind. A constant reminder of the loneliness you bring. They call you a monster. They shun you. You find a place to belong, but you know it's a lie, don't you? You cling to that boy, the Ice Mage, hoping his cold heart will numb your pain, but he doesn't want you. He never will. You are, and always will be, a nuisance, alone, drowning in your own endless, miserable rain. It was too much. Every fear, every insecurity, every moment of her painful past crashed down on her at once. A heart-wrenching sob escaped her lips. No, stop. Outside, the mist thickened into a downpour. Inside the cave, Juvia's own magic erupted. Water burst from her body, swirling around her in a violent, weeping vortex. It wasn't an attack, it was a cage of pure, liquid agony. She was trapped in the center of it, on her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. Juvia, Gray yelled, fighting through his own mental anguish to get to his feet. He stumbled towards the vortex. Stop this. You're stronger than this. He tried to freeze the water, but it was too saturated with her sorrow, his ice shattered against it. His words, meant to help, only confirmed Morpheus's poison. She wasn't strong enough. She was failing. Throughout the entire ordeal, Naruto had remained motionless at the entrance of the cave. He watched, his expression unreadable, his mind a fortress. Morpheus's power had washed over him, of course, but it had found nothing to latch onto. The man's magic sought out regret, sorrow, and guilt. Naruto had those in spades. Enough to drown a world, but he had faced them, accepted them, and made them a part of his strength. His will was a mountain, forged in war and loss, and a gentle psychic breeze could not move it. He's like a Nara, Kurama rumbled in his mind, but instead of shadows, he uses emotions. Pathetic. Naruto watched Gray fail to reach Juvia. He saw Lucy, tears streaming down her face, unable to do anything. He saw his powerful new friends laid low by their own memories. And he saw Juvia, a woman who felt everything so deeply, drowning in herself. He finally moved. He didn't run. He walked. He moved with a calm, deliberate purpose, straight towards the raging vortex of water. Morpheus turned his full attention to him, sensing the only real threat. And you, the silver-haired mage whispered, his lilac eyes glowing with power. The anomaly. You carry a grief that puts all others to shame. A world of ghosts sits on your shoulders. Let me show you their faces. Let me show you the master who died for you, the parents you never knew, the friend you had to cripple. Naruto didn't even blink. You think you're the first person to try and use my past against me? He said, his voice dangerously quiet. You have no idea what real pain is. He reached the edge of the vortex. The water, charged with Juvia's agony, should have ripped him apart. Instead, it parted before him, creating a clear, dry path to its epicenter. Morpheus's jaw dropped in shock. This was impossible. The water was a physical manifestation of Juvia's will. It should have obeyed her despair. Naruto stepped through the opening and stood before the weeping, broken woman. He knelt down, his expression softening with a profound empathy. He didn't say, "It's okay." He didn't say, "You're strong." He simply placed his hand gently on her head. He closed his eyes and reached out, not with chakra, but with his very soul. He connected with her, diving headfirst into the storm of her emotions. He felt the sting of her loneliness, the chill of her rejection, the crushing weight of her self-doubt. He didn't try to stop it. He didn't try to fix it. He simply shared it. And then, he opened the floodgates of his own heart. He showed her everything. He showed her a small, blonde boy sitting alone on a swing set, watching other children play, his heart aching with a loneliness so complete it was a physical hunger. He showed her the glares, the whispers of Demon Fox, the isolation that was his entire world. He showed her the death of the third Hokage, the loss of Jiraiya, the pain of Ightting, his best friend to the brink of death. He showed her a world at war, the faces of countless friends and comrades lost to the struggle. He poured his own lifetime of pain, his own ocean of sorrow, into her. Juvia's sobbing stopped. Her eyes, wide and streaming with tears, looked up at him. She was feeling it, all of it. His pain was just like hers. No, it was greater. It was a bottomless, crushing abyss of loss that made her own suffering feel like a shallow puddle. Yet, he was still standing. He was kneeling in front of her, his eyes filled not with pity, but with a perfect, devastating understanding. Her despair didn't have anywhere to go. It had met a sorrow so much greater than its own that it was simply absorbed. The vortex of water collapsed, splashing harmlessly onto the cavern floor. The rain outside stopped. A single ray of sunlight pierced the clouds, lancing through the cave entrance to illuminate the two of them. Morpheus stared, his serene composure finally shattered. What are you?" he stammered. His magic relied on overwhelming his victims. But how could you overwhelm an ocean? He never got an answer. From the shadows near the cave entrance, a second Naruto, a shadow clone formed unnoticed in the first moments of the confrontation, slammed a swirling sphere of blue energy into Morpheus's back. The Rasengan hit with the force of a battering ram, and the fight was over. Back in the guild hall the next day, the mood was subdued. Urza, Gray, and Natsu were grappling with the fact that they had been so easily defeated. But the biggest change was Juvia. She wasn't clinging to Gray. She sat at a table by herself, nursing a glass of water, watching Naruto as he quietly ate his ramen. Her obsession with Gray hadn't vanished, but it was now overshadowed by something else, something deeper. Gratitude, fascination, a connection. He hadn't just saved her. He had validated her. He had seen the deepest, darkest parts of her and had not turned away. He had shown her she wasn't alone in her pain. Meanwhile, in a quiet office in the capital city of Crocus, a man in a dark, impeccably tailored suit read a report. His name was Leon Vastja's less famous, more pragmatic cousin, Bastian. He was the head of the Magic Council's New Rune Division. The report detailed the events at Oshariman, focusing on the strange, foreign energy signature of the newest member of Fairy Tail. An energy that didn't just neutralize a powerful psychic mage, but completely overwhelmed him. An energy that had first appeared on the coast, on the same day a con man named Bora was mysteriously defeated. Bastian tapped a finger on his desk. His mission was to identify and classify potential threats to the continent. Zirf, Acknowledge, and now, perhaps, a third name belonged on that list. Uzumaki Naruto, he murmured, his eyes narrowing. Let's see what you're made of. Later that evening, as the guild began to liven up, Juvia finally approached Naruto's table. He looked up from his meal. His expression neutral. She didn't blush or stammer. She stood straight, her hands clasped before her, her blue eyes clear and serious. Juvia came to say thank you, she said, her voice soft but firm. You didn't look at Juvia like she was a monster. You understood. Naruto offered her a small, genuine smile. It was the kind of smile that reached his eyes, crinkling the corners and erasing some of the deep weariness that always seemed to linger there. Pain is pain, he said. No one should have to carry it alone. He understood. He truly understood. For the first time in her life, Juvia felt seen. Not as the Rain Woman, not as a former enemy, not as Gray-sama's devoted follower, but as herself. And in that moment, a new, powerful current began to flow in the deep ocean of her heart. Lucy watched them from the bar, a thoughtful, slightly troubled expression on her face. She saw the profound look that passed between them, the quiet understanding that needed no words. She was happy for Juvia. She truly was. But she couldn't help but feel a strange, unfamiliar pang in her own chest. A feeling that was suspiciously like jealousy. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. Cards on the table. The guild settled back into its familiar, chaotic rhythm, but something had shifted. Naruto was no longer just a quiet stranger Lucy had brought home, he was a known quantity, a force to be respected. The change was most evident in the daily sparring sessions. Natsu, his enthusiasm undiminished by facts, still demanded a fight every morning. Now, however, Gray would often join in, a silent acknowledgement that this was no longer a game but a genuine learning opportunity. This morning was no different. Natsu and Gray stood opposite Naruto in the clearing behind the guild hall. A space kept perpetually clear for just such occasions. The air crackled, Natsu's fists already smoking, Gray's skin giving off a chill. "All right, Naruto, no more holding back," Natsu yelled, a wide, feral grin on his face. "This time I'm going all out." "You say that every time, ash for brains," Gray taunted, slamming his fists together. "Ice make. Shield." A large, intricate shield of ice erupted from the ground in front of him, ready for Natsu's inevitable reckless charge. Naruto stood loosely, his hands in his pockets, his expression calm. "Come on, then." Natsu shot forward like a cannonball, his body wreathed in the flames of the Fire Dragon King. It was a powerful, head-on assault meant to overwhelm with sheer force. At the same instant, Gray stomped his foot, and a wave of jagged ice spikes raced across the ground from the side, a pincer movement designed to trap Naruto. It was good teamwork, born of 1,000 brawls. But it was also predictable. Naruto didn't move until the last possible second. As Natsu's fiery fist was about to connect, he took a single, fluid step to the side. He didn't just dodge, he used the motion to place his hand on Natsu's back, gently but firmly redirecting the Dragon Slayer's momentum. Natsu, unable to stop, roared past him and crashed headfirst into Gray's ice shield, which shattered on impact. At the same time, Naruto lifted one foot, tapping his heel against the lead spike of Gray's attack. A small, precise pulse of his own energy traveled down the ice, not to break it, but to reverse its polarity. The wave of spikes stopped, shuddered, and then shot back towards a startled Gray, who had to dive out of the way to avoid being impaled by his own magic. The entire exchange took less than 3 seconds. Natsu was picking himself out of a pile of shattered ice, and Gray was scrambling back to his feet. Naruto hadn't moved more than a single step from his starting position. "You rely too much on your strongest attacks," Naruto said, his voice even. "Natsu, you leave yourself completely open after a charge. Gray, your attacks are creative, but you don't think about what happens if they're turned against you." He wasn't lecturing, he was stating facts. This was how he taught. He demonstrated a weakness by exploiting it, a lesson far more potent than any words. He saw the flicker of understanding in Gray's eyes, and the frustrated but determined glint in Natsu's. They were learning. From the guild's porch, Cana Alberona watched, a half-empty tankard of ale resting on the railing. She took a long, slow sip, her dark eyes narrowed in concentration. She wasn't watching the flashy displays of fire and ice, she was watching Naruto. His economy of motion, his perfect balance, the way he seemed to know what his opponents would do before they did. It was a thing of terrifying beauty. He fought like a grandmaster playing a game of chess, while Natsu and Gray were still just slamming the pieces together. Her gaze was occasioned by the heavy thud of Makarov's feet landing on the railing beside her. The guild master followed her line of sight. "He's quite something, isn't he?" Makarov said, his voice a low rumble. "He's a monster," Cana replied. Though there was no malice in the word, it was a statement of fact, like calling the sky blue. "But he's a gentle monster. The most dangerous kind," Makarov agreed. "He holds back so much. I can feel it. It's like an ocean pretending to be a pond." He then turned his attention to the guild at large, his voice suddenly booming. "Listen up, you brats. The time has come again. I will now announce the participants for this year's S-Class Mage Promotion Trial." A wave of excitement and tension swept through the guild. This was the pinnacle of a fairy tale mage's ambition. To become S-Class was to be recognized as one of the guild's strongest, a leader, a legend. Makarov announced the names: Natsu, Gray, Elfman, Levi, Fried, and Juvia. A mixture of cheers and groans filled the hall. Lucy sighed, disappointed but not surprised. But as the names were read, Cana's grip on her tankard tightened until her knuckles were white. When the last name was called, and it wasn't hers, something inside her seemed to snap. She slammed the mug down, sloshing ale everywhere, and stalked back into the shadows of the guild hall without a word. Naruto, his sparring session forgotten, watched her go. He saw the forced nonchalance in her stride, the rigid set of her shoulders. It was a mask he knew well, the kind people wore when they were trying to convince themselves they didn't care. Even as their world was crumbling. The next few days saw a subtle poison seep into Cana's demeanor. She drank more, her laughter was louder and harsher, and her jokes had a cruel, self-deprecating edge. She rebuffed any attempt at conversation, pushing away Lucy's concern with a sarcastic comment and Mikau's friendly advice with a glare. She was isolating herself, building a wall of booze and bitterness around her heart. Naruto saw it all. He didn't approach her. He didn't offer empty platitudes. He just watched, and waited. He found his chance late one night. The guild was empty, the lingering scents of ale and old wood hanging in the silent air. A single lamp glowed in a far corner, illuminating Cana. She was alone at her favorite table, a constellation of empty mugs surrounding her. She wasn't drinking. She was just staring at a single playing card in her hand, the Queen of Hearts. Naruto came down from the roof, his footsteps silent on the wooden stairs. He had been meditating under the shattered moon, trying to find a balance between the world's wild magic and his own disciplined chakra. He saw her, and a quiet sense of duty pulled him from his solitude. She heard him, her head snapping up, her eyes defensive. "What do you want, golden boy? Come to give the town drunk a lecture?" He ignored the jibe. He walked over, pulled out a chair, and sat down opposite her, saying nothing. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. Cana glared at him, waiting for the judgment, the pity, the advice. It never came. He just sat there, a calm, unwavering presence in the dim light. Finally, her defenses cracked. The anger in her eyes gave way to a raw, shimmering frustration. "Why are you even here?" she whispered, her voice rough. "Because it looks like you could use someone to sit with," he replied simply. That was it. That simple act of solidarity, of presence without judgment, broke the dam. A single tear traced a path through the grime on her cheek. "This was my 4th time, she said, her voice barely audible. 4 times I've been in the S-class trial. And 4 times I've failed. Do you know how pathetic that is?" She laughed, a broken, ugly sound. "Everyone else moves on, gets stronger. Natsu, Gray, even Juvia, who's only been here a few years, gets a shot. And I'm still just here, stuck." She flipped the card over. "He'll be on Tenro Island for the trial. Guildarts. My father." The word was laced with a decade of pain. "I told myself, I swore that I would become S-class. That then, finally, I'd have the courage to tell him who I am. That he would finally see me. But I can't even get on the damn list anymore." She finally looked at him, her eyes pleading for something. An answer, a reason, anything. Naruto leaned forward, his gaze soft but intense. He didn't offer sympathy. He offered truth. "Your strength isn't determined by a title," he said, his voice low and steady. "And if he can only see you when you're standing on a pedestal, and he's a fool who doesn't deserve to see you at all." His words struck her with the force of a physical blow. She had expected him to say, "You can do it next year," or, "Don't give up." She had never expected him to so completely validate her, to put the fault on the father she idolized and feared in equal measure. He saw her, her strength, her pain. "I can't beat people like Natsu or Urza with just my cards," she admitted. "The fight going out of her. It's not strong enough." "Then you're not using them correctly," he countered. He gently took the Queen of Hearts from her fingers. "Your magic is holder type, right? You use the cards as a focus for different spells." She nodded. "Then stop thinking of them as just weapons. A battle isn't just about who can hit the hardest. It's about who controls the field. Your cards give you more options than anyone in this guild. You have 100 different weapons. They have 1 or 2. That's your advantage." He stood up. "Meet me in the forest tomorrow at dawn. If you want to get stronger, I'll help you. Not to get a title, but for yourself." The sun was just beginning to pierce the morning mist when Cana arrived. Naruto was already there, standing in the middle of a clearing. He wasn't stretching or warming up. He was just watching the way the light filtered through the leaves. "All right," Cana said, shuffling her deck of cards with practiced hands. "What's the plan? You gonna teach me some secret golden ninja magic?" "No," Naruto said, turning to face her. "I'm going to teach you to see the battlefield." He picked up a small stone. "Hit this." Cana shrugged and flicked a card. Lightning. A bolt of electricity shot from her hand and blasted the stone to dust. "Done. What's next?" "You missed," Naruto said. "What are you talking about?" "It's vaporized." "The target wasn't the stone," he replied. "It was the ground underneath it, the air around it, the leaves on the branch above it. You used a single, powerful attack that accomplished one goal. But what if you laid a sleep magic card on that branch, to fall on someone's head when the lightning startled the birds? What if you used a water card to turn the ground under the stone to mud, trapping your enemy before you attacked? What if your first card was just a flash of light, to blind them, so your second card couldn't miss?" Cana stared, her mind racing. She had always seen her magic as a series of direct attacks. He was describing it as a web, a sequence of interconnected events. For the next week, they trained. It was grueling. He didn't spar with her. He gave her tasks, challenges that forced her to think differently. He'd have clones of himself attack her from multiple angles, forcing her to use her cards for area denial and crowd control. He taught her how to embed a card with a sliver of her magic and toss it onto a tree, using it as a magical sensor, an early warning system. She learned to use her illusion cards not as attacks, but as feints, creating a shimmering duplicate of herself to draw an enemy's attention while she prepared a more powerful spell. It was a revelation. Her magic wasn't weak. She had just been using a library's worth of knowledge to hammer a single nail. Naruto pushed her past her limits, forcing her to be faster, smarter, more creative. Their rapport grew with every session, a bond forged in sweat and shared determination. The playful banter returned, but now it was underpinned by a deep, mutual respect. He saw her potential, and she was captivated by the quiet, unshakable certainty of his power. On the 8th day, their training was interrupted by the urgent ringing of the guild's warning bell. They raced back to find the guild in an uproar. A request had come in directly from the Magic Council. A creature of immense power had appeared near a remote mountain village, wiping out an entire platoon of rune knights sent to investigate it. "It's not behaving like any magical beast on record," Mirajan said, her voice tight with worry as she read the report. "It seems to be made of pure, unstable magic. It's absorbing any spell cast at it." Natsu was already fired up. "Sounds tough. I'm in." Urza nodded grimly. "This is a job for all of us." As Team Natsu prepared to head out, Cana stepped forward, her deck of cards in hand. "I'm coming too." Natsu looked at her, surprised. "Cana, this sounds pretty heavy." "I can handle it," she said, her voice steady. She glanced at Naruto, a flicker of a challenge in her eyes. "I have a few new tricks." Naruto just nodded, a small, proud smile touching his lips. He knew she was ready. In the shadows of the town, a man in a simple merchant's cloak watched them leave, a magical communication lacrima in his hand. It was the rune operative. This was the perfect opportunity to see the anomaly in action against a threat their own forces couldn't handle. The village was a scene of devastation. Buildings were torn apart, the ground was scorched, but not by fire. She looked as if reality itself had been warped and twisted. In the center of the village square stood the creature. It was a shifting, amorphous blob of black and purple energy, shot through with veins of sickening, chaotic light. It had no face, no limbs, just a roiling mass that pulsed with a malevolent intelligence. "What is that thing?" Lucy whispered, horrified. "Whatever it is, it's going down." Natsu roared, charging in. Fire Dragon's iron fist. He slammed his flaming fist into the creature's mass. The energy blob rippled, and then, to everyone's shock, it simply absorbed the flames. It pulsed, grew slightly larger, and a tendril of dark energy lashed out, swatting Natsu aside like a fly. "My ice has no effect," Gray yelled, erecting and then watching a wall of ice dissolve as the creature touched it. Urza, in her adamantine armor, managed to block a blow, but the force behind it sent her skidding back dozens of feet, her shield cracking. Its physical strength is immense. The creature was a nightmare. It had no weakness because it was pure, adaptable power. It was then that it turned its attention towards Cana. Perhaps it sensed her unique, versatile magic, or perhaps it was just random. A thick, dark pseudopod shot towards her, moving faster than anything she could dodge. She didn't try to. Instead, she threw a card at the ground in front of her. Card of the Iron Wall. A shimmering, translucent barrier appeared, but she knew it wouldn't hold. At the same time, she tossed a second card high into the air. Fairy Glitter. A voice in her head whispered, a spell she wasn't ready for. But the strategy was what mattered. It was a feint. The creature's tendrils smashed through her barrier, the force of the impact throwing her backwards. But its attention was momentarily drawn by the bright, glittering card in the air. That was the opening. The moment the tendril struck her shield, just as she was thrown off her feet and hurtling towards a stone wall, Naruto moved. His demeanor shifted. The calm observer was gone, replaced by something cold, ancient, and absolute. He didn't flicker or flash. He was just there, between Cana and the wall. He caught her effortlessly, setting her on her feet as if she weighed nothing. "Stay behind me," he said, his voice a low command that vibrated with power. He turned to face the creature. It sensed the change, the sudden appearance of a power that dwarfed its own chaotic energy. It recoiled, its form coalescing as if bracing itself. Naruto didn't summon a Rasengan. He didn't form a clone. He simply walked forward and placed his open palm on the scorched earth. "It's just lost energy," he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. "It just needs to go home." A wave of pure, golden-orange light radiated out from him. It wasn't an explosion. It was a silent, inexorable tide of absolute order. It wasn't fire or lightning or force. It was the energy of life itself, the power of the sage, calm, controlled, and undeniable. When the light washed over the creature, it didn't scream or explode. The roiling, chaotic mass of dark magic simply stilled. The chaotic energies within it were soothed, untangled, and unmade. The purples and blacks dissolved, breaking down into their component parts and releasing back into the atmosphere as motes of peaceful, white light. In seconds, the terrifying monster was gone, leaving nothing behind but a patch of ground where the grass was suddenly lush and green, dotted with small, blooming flowers. Silence. Natsu, Gray, Urza, and Lucy stared, their minds unable to process what they had just witnessed. They had seen power that destroys, power that creates, power that defends. They had never seen power that simply corrects. From a ridge overlooking the village, the Rune Ope, Rative stared at the broken magical sensor in his hand. It hadn't just been overloaded. The readings had gone from off the charts dangerous to absolute zero in less than a second. He felt a cold dread mixed with a terrified awe. This wasn't a mage. This was something else entirely. Naruto turned, the immense pressure vanishing as if it had never been. He walked over to Cana, who was still staring at the spot where the monster had been. He gently touched her arm. "Are you all right?" She looked up at him. Her face was pale with shock, but her eyes were on fire. She had felt the power wash over her, a warm, life-affirming wave that had calmed her racing heart even as it unmade the enemy. It was the most terrifying and beautiful thing she had ever experienced. He had saved her life. But more than that, in that single, incredible moment, he had shown her what true strength was. Not a title, not a legacy. It was the quiet, absolute power to protect what you cared about. He helped her to her feet, his hand warm and steady on hers. Their fingers interlaced for a moment longer than necessary, a silent, electric connection passing between them. From across the square, Juvia watched the exchange, her hand unconsciously clutching the fabric over her heart. She saw the way Cana looked at him, a look of awe and dawning, fierce emotion. Then she saw Lucy, whose expression was a complex mixture of relief, wonder, and a sharp, undeniable pang of longing. The quiet whirlpool that had landed in their guild was starting to pull them all into its current. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Isle of Ghosts and Gods. The sea air over Tenro Island was electric, thick with anticipation and the potent, ancient magic of the island itself. Naruto stood on the deck of the boat as it cut through the turquoise water. His gaze fixed on the lush green landmass rising from the ocean. It felt alive, radiating a natural energy so dense and pure it reminded him of Mount Myoboku. He could feel the Ta-I-led beast chakra within him stir in appreciation, a low, contented hum. He wasn't a participant in the S-class trials, a fact that Natsu loudly lamented and Urza quietly seemed thankful for. Makarov had assigned him a different role. "You will be our guardian," the old master had said, his eyes serious. "Your senses are sharper than anyone's. If anything goes wrong, you will be our first and last line of defense." Naruto had simply nodded. The role of protector was one he had worn his entire life. The trial began in a flurry of chaos. Urza blocked off all but one path from the docked boat, forcing the contestants into a bottleneck. Natsu, in a stroke of uncharacteristic cleverness, had Happy fly him directly to the island, bypassing the blockade entirely. The partnerships were quickly met in the ensuing scramble. Lucy found herself paired with Cana, and Juvia with a determined Lizana. Gray, paired with Loke, had already vanished into the trees. Naruto remained at the designated base camp near the shore, a quiet observer as Makarov and Gildarts, who had arrived with a casual, earth-shaking gait, explained the rules. He watched Cana and Lucy head into the jungle, Cana giving him a quick, confident wink that spoke of her newfound resolve. He saw Juvia glance back, not towards Gray, but towards him, a small, hesitant look of hope in her eyes before she too disappeared into the foliage. He felt the weight of their trust, a familiar and welcome burden. He settled under a massive tree, closed his eyes, and expanded his senses. It was a technique he had honed during the war, a way to feel the ebb and flow of energy across a vast area. He could feel the magical signatures of each participant as they moved through the island's 8 designated trial paths. He felt Natsu's fiery clash with Gildarts, a battle that was over almost before it began. He felt Gray's cool, sharp energy. And he felt the warm, starlight glow of Lucy and the sharp, versatile hum of Cana's cards. Everything was as it should be. Then, the world went wrong. A new energy signature appeared, vast and malevolent, descending from the sky. It was a warship, a monstrous thing of dark metal and twisted wood that blotted out the sun. Its energy felt like rotting death. Naruto's eyes snapped open, his body instantly tensing. This wasn't part of any trial. This was an invasion. "Master," he called out, already on his feet. His voice sharp with an authority that made even Gildarts turn. Before Makarov could react, the sky filled with smaller, equally malevolent signatures. Mages. Dozens of them, their power ranging from mediocre to alarmingly strong. They swarmed the island like hornets from a kicked nest. "Grimoire Heart," Gildarts growled, his expression turning deadly serious. "What are they doing here?" "They're hunting," Naruto said, his sensory perception painting a grim picture in his mind. "They're spreading out, targeting the trial participants." He created a dozen shadow clones in a silent, instantaneous puff of smoke. "Find our people. Assess the threats. Do not engage unless you have to. Report back." The clones nodded and vanished into the trees, moving with a speed that was a blur to the eye. Naruto's demeanor had undergone a complete transformation. The quiet observer was gone. In his place stood a field commander. His amber eyes were cold and sharp, scanning the island's energy flows like a map. He turned to Makarov. "They're here for something, or someone. Their movements are too coordinated for a random attack." His statement was punctuated by a massive explosion. From the direction of the camp's supply tent, a huge, muscular man with goat-like legs and a ridiculously ornate axe landed in the clearing. It was Capricorn, one of the 7 kin of Purgatory. But his energy felt strange, controlled. "I am Capricorn," he announced in a clipped, formal tone. "My apologies, but my mistress requires that I retrieve Lucy Heartfilia. Please stand aside." Before anyone could react, he was engaged. Not by Naruto or Gildarts, but by Loke, who had appeared in a flash of golden light, his loyalty to Lucy overriding all else. Their battle was fierce, but Capricorn was a different class of opponent. He fought with a cold, inhuman precision that quickly overwhelmed the lion spirit. It was then that one of Naruto's clones dispelled, feeding him its information. "Lucy and Cana, ambushed by another of the 7 kin. Lucy is separated, cornered by this Capricorn. He's a celestial spirit. His original master was Lucy's mother. He's being controlled. The information clicked into place. This wasn't just a battle, it was a rescue mission on multiple fronts. Naruto glanced at the main fight, where Locke was being beaten back. A direct intervention here would be simple, but Lucy was the key. He had to enable her, not save her. He vanished. Lucy scrambled backwards, her heart pounding against her ribs. She was trapped. Capricorn stood before her, his expressionless face a mask of implacable duty. My contract with your mother, Layla, was to serve the Heartfilia line, he said, his voice devoid of emotion. However, my current master, Zoldio, has subsumed that contract. I must obey him. You can fight it, Lucy pleaded, fumbling for her keys. My mother wouldn't want this. Human emotion is irrelevant to the letter of a contract, Capricorn stated, taking a step forward. Suddenly, a voice spoke from the canopy above. He's right. Lucy and Capricorn both looked up. Naruto was perched on a thick branch, looking down at them. But then another Naruto dropped to the ground on Lucy's left, and a third on her right. Clones. A contract is a contract, the Naruto on the ground continued, taking a step forward. But contracts can be broken. Or, they can be fulfilled in unexpected ways. Capricorn turned his attention to the clones, his internal sensors flagging them as threats. Your parlor tricks will not avail you. They're not for you, the real Naruto said from the tree. His voice was projected directly into Lucy's mind. Lucy, he's a spirit, you're a celestial wizard. This is your fight. His movements are precise, but repetitive. He relies on a pattern. We'll show you the pattern. As Capricorn lunged for the clone on the right, the one on the left shouted, now, Lucy. His left side is exposed for 1.2 seconds after a forward thrust. Capricorn, startled, aborted his attack and spun, but it was too late. The information was out. He attacked the other clone, a powerful leg sweep. After a low attack, his upper body has a recovery window of 0.8 seconds. The real Naruto called from the tree. It was a brilliant, maddening strategy. The clones didn't fight Capricorn. They engaged him, dodged him, and analyzed him, calling out his weaknesses in real time. They were a living, breathing tactical analysis, feeding Lucy the data she needed. He's a machine, Naruto's voice echoed in her head. And you're going to break him. Not with power, with your heart. Empowered, Lucy found her courage. She summoned Taurus and Scorpio, not for a direct assault, but as a coordinated pincer. Using the openings Naruto's clones were creating, she directed her spirits with a newfound precision. It became a dance. Capricorn would attack a clone, Naruto would call out the weakness, and Lucy would have Scorpio or Taurus exploit it, landing a solid, calculated blow. Finally, Capricorn was on one knee, his human host, Zoldio, struggling against the combined magical pressure. Remember your promise, Capricorn. Lucy yelled, her voice ringing with the authority of a true master. Remember my mother. That was the final key. Her own power, combined with the emotional blow, shattered Zoldio's control. Capricorn cried out as the dark magic was purged from him, his loyalty snapping back to its rightful place. He belonged to Lucy. She had won. Not because someone had saved her, but because someone had shown her how to save herself. She looked up at the tree where Naruto had been. But he was already gone. Naruto raced through the jungle, the information from another dispelled clone fresh in his mind. Juvia. She's fighting one of the seven kin. A girl named Merity. They're using some kind of sensory link magic. Juvia is taking damage every time Urza fights another one of them. It's killing her. He arrived at a cliff's edge to a grim scene. Za was locked in a desperate battle with a hulking, dark-skinned man with an eye patch, Azuma. And a short distance away, Juvia was on the ground, convulsing in pain, with a pink-haired girl, Merity, standing over her. Her eyes glowing with a fanatic's zeal. A band of purple light connected Juvia to Merity, and another stretched off into the distance, presumably towards Gray. With this Magilti sense, anyone I link will share the same sensations. Merity cried, her voice high and strained. If one of them dies, the other dies too. Juvia locks her. You will die with the man you love. Juvia was sobbing, clutching at her chest. Gray-sama. Juvia can't let you get hurt. She was trying to fight, but her love for Gray made her own body a weapon against her. She couldn't bring herself to harm Merity, knowing it would harm Gray. Naruto appeared behind Merity in a silent flash. "That's a clever, cowardly jutsu," he said, his voice dangerously low. Merity spun around, startled, and tried to create a new link to him. Her magical energy washed over him and dissipated harmlessly, like waves against a cliff. His will was too strong. There was nothing for her magic to grip. He ignored her, his full attention on Juvia. He knelt beside her, his expression a mask of intense concentration. "Juvia, look at me," she did, her tear-filled blue eyes meeting his calm amber ones. "I can't break the link from the outside. But I can join it. Trust me." He placed 2 fingers on her forehead. He didn't pump chakra into her. He did something far more delicate. He reached out with his own sensory abilities, using the water in her body and the ambient moisture in the air as a conduit. He found the pulsating purple band of Merity's magic and, instead of trying to sever it, he simply slipped inside. Merity gasped. Suddenly, her carefully controlled sensory link was flooded with a third presence. It was vast, ancient, and filled with a sorrow so profound it made her own fanatical devotion feel like a child's tantrum. She felt the sting of 1,000 betrayals, the agony of 1,000 losses. But underneath it all, she felt an unbreakable, unwavering warmth. It wasn't an attack, it was an offering, an empathy so powerful it was a weapon. The link, designed to transmit pain and death, was now transmitting Naruto's very soul. He wasn't severing the emotional feedback loop, he was overwhelming it. With a feeling Merity had never known. True, unconditional love for one's comrades. The Magilty sense shattered. Merity stumbled back, clutching her head, tears streaming down her face. She had tried to weaponize emotion, only to be utterly defeated by it. Juvia's convulsions stopped. She stared at Naruto, breathless, feeling the last echoes of his heart in her own. He had entered the darkest, most painful part of her magic and filled it with light. He hadn't just saved her life. He had saved her from her own love. "Now," Naruto said, his voice gentle as he helped her up. "Go help your friends." He was already turning, his senses locked on to a new, massive spike of power that threatened to tear the island in half. That power was Cana, and she was losing. She had fought brilliantly, using the strategies Naruto had taught her. She had used her cards to outmaneuver and trap the smaller Grimoire Heart mages. But now she faced Blue Note Stinger, a man whose sheer magical power was a physical force. He stood before her, his hands in his pockets, an arrogant smirk on his face. The very ground around him seemed to warp and bend. "Your tricks are amusing, little girl," Blue Note said condescendingly. "But they are still just tricks." Cana was breathing heavily, her body bruised and battered. She had thrown everything she had at him. Illusions, elemental attacks, traps, but his gravity magic was an absolute defense and a terrifying offense. "I'm not done yet," she growled, laying down her final card. It was a risky move, a spell that required immense concentration. "Oh, I think you are," Blue Note said. He lifted one finger. Gravity. The world turned sideways. Cana cried out as an invisible, crushing weight slammed her into the ground, cracking the earth beneath her. Her bones groaned, her lungs burned. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe. It felt like the entire sky was pressing down on her, trying to smear her into nothingness. Through a haze of pain, she saw Gildarts fighting Hades, the master of Grimoire Heart, in the distance. He was too far away, too occupied. She was alone. A pity, Blue Note sighed, preparing to apply the final, fatal pressure. "Hey." The voice was calm, almost casual. It cut through the roaring in Cana's ears. Blue Note turned, his smirk faltering. Naruto stood 20 feet away, his expression completely flat. "Let her go," Naruto said. "It wasn't a request." Blue Note laughed. "And what will you do if I don't, boy? Your energy is strange, but you cannot defy gravity itself." He gestured, and a wave of crushing force erupted towards Naruto. Naruto didn't try to block it. He didn't try to dodge it. He simply planted his right hand, palm down, on the ground. The gravity wave hit an invisible wall and vanished. The immense pressure crushing Cana didn't just lessen. It disappeared entirely, as if a switch had been flipped. She gasped, taking in a shuddering breath of air. The ground beneath her felt Normal. Blue Note stared, his jaw hanging open. His gravity field, the absolute law he imposed on the world, had been negated in a perfect 20-foot radius around Naruto and Cana. Gravity is just another part of nature, Naruto said, standing up. And nature energy listens to me. He took a step forward. You hurt my friend. You made a mistake. He vanished from sight. Before Blue Note could even register the movement, Naruto was in front of him, his fist drawn back. It wasn't a Rasengan or some other flashy technique. It was a simple, perfect punch, but it was charged with so much concentrated sage energy that the air itself screamed. It connected with Blue Note's stomach, and the arrogant mage's eyes bulged. He didn't fly backwards. The force was so focused, so absolute, that it simply drove him into the ground, creating a crater 10 feet deep. He lay at the bottom, unconscious. Naruto stood over him for a moment before turning away. He walked back to Cana and knelt beside her, his expression softening. He gently helped her sit up. You fought well, he said. Cana just stared at him, her heart hammering for an entirely different reason now. He had faced down a man who felt like a god and had swatted him aside like an insect, all to protect her. The raw, overwhelming power was terrifying. The gentle concern in his eyes as he looked at her now was devastating. It was then that Hades, seeing his trump card defeated, unleashed the full power of the devil's heart. A wave of magic so dark, so ancient and vile, washed over the island. As it did, it resonated with something else, a dormant echo in the void. For a single, terrifying second, everyone on the island, fairy tale and grimoire heart alike, shared the same vision. They saw a world of perfect, gray crystal. They saw people with blank, emotionless eyes moving in silent, orderly lines. They felt a cold, suffocating peace, an order so absolute it was the death of everything that made life worth living. It was the will of the Weaver, a nascent god stirred from its slumber by the massive influx of demonic energy. The vision was gone as quickly as it came, leaving everyone shaken and confused. But Naruto felt it more keenly, a cold dread that had nothing to do with grimoire heart. He recognized the chilling desire for absolute order. It was Kagaya's dream, twisted and reborn. The fight was ending. Makarov, in his giant form, was finishing off Hades's warship. Guildarts had defeated the Dark Guild's master. The battle was won. Cana, her strength returned, finally walked over to Guildarts. Dad, she said, the word trembling but clear. The tearful, shocked reunion was a moment of pure, heartfelt victory. Naruto watched from a distance, giving them their space, a small, proud smile on his face. He had protected his friend and helped her find the courage she needed. But the island's trials were not over. A shadow fell over them. A roar, deep and primal and filled with an ancient, nihilistic hatred, split the sky. The sea began to churn, and the magic of the island itself seemed to cry out in fear. Acknowledge, the black dragon of the apocalypse, had descended. It landed on a nearby cliff, its sheer presence erasing all thoughts of victory. This was not a foe to be fought. This was an extinction-level event. The members of Fairy Tail gathered together, wounded and exhausted, but unbroken. They stood in a circle, holding hands, ready to face the end as a family. Naruto moved to stand among them. He found himself between Cana and Lucy, with Juvia just a step away. He looked at their faces, terrified, but resolute. He had found a new home, a new family. And he would be damned if he let it be destroyed. As Acknowledge opened its maw, gathering the energy for a roar that would wipe the island from existence, Naruto planted his feet, a store of golden-orange sage energy beginning to swirl around him. He met the dragon's gaze without fear. He had faced down gods. This was just another monster. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. 7 years in a golden sleep. The world became a symphony of terror. Acknowledge's roar was not a sound. It was a physical force, a wave of pure nihilism that tore at the very fabric of magic. The sky darkened, the sea boiled, and the ancient trees of Tenro Island wept splinters. Naruto stood his ground, the golden light of sage mode flaring to life around him, a lone candle against a hurricane of darkness. He could feel the dragon's power. It was immense, ancient, and utterly devoid of anything but hatred. It was a force of nature, a walking apocalypse. But as the members of Fairy Tail linked hands, their fear, exhaustion, and unbreakable defiance forged into a single, desperate prayer, something answered. A light, warm and gentle, bloomed from the center of their circle. A ghostly figure of a young girl with long, flowing hair appeared before them, her expression serene. Mavis Vermilion, the first master of fairy tale. Her magic, an ultimate defense born from the power of unwavering bonds, washed over them. It was not a shield of force, but a shield of love. It met Acnologia's blast of apocalyptic energy, and for a single, timeless moment, there was only light. For Lucy, Juvia, Cana, and the others, the sensation was one of instantaneous, dreamless sleep. They felt a profound warmth, a sense of absolute safety, and then, nothing. For Naruto, it was different. As the golden light of the fairy sphere enveloped him, his own sage mode energy resonated with it. He was not put to sleep. He was pulled into the heart of the spell itself. He found himself floating in an endless, golden space, a sea of pure, benevolent magic. He could feel the sleeping consciousnesses of his guildmates around him, safe and sound. But he was awake. He was aware. What is this place? He thought, his mind clear. The witch's spell is powerful. Kurama's voice rumbled, not from within his seal, but seemingly from the very light around them. It has frozen us in time, protecting us. But your energy, it doesn't quite fit. It's like oil in her water. So we float, aware, while they sleep. Time had no meaning in the golden sphere. Days, months, years, they were irrelevant concepts. At first, Naruto fought against the stasis, trying to find a way out. To return to the world and check on those they had left behind. But the sphere was absolute. It was a perfect defense, and a perfect prison. So, he accepted it. And in that acceptance, he found an opportunity he had not had since the day he woke up on that strange, white sand beach, the chance to think. To process. He journeyed through his own memories, no longer as a victim of his past, but as an observer. He walked the streets of Konoha, feeling the phantom warmth of Ichiraku ramen and the cool stone of the Hokage monument. He stood with Iruka, Kakashi, and Jiraiya. He fought alongside Sakura and faced off against Sasuke. He felt the joy of his victories, the searing pain of his losses, the crushing weight of the war. He let it all wash over him, not as a storm, but as a cleansing rain. He grieved for the world he had lost, and for the first time, he truly let it go. It was not his home anymore. He communed with the lingering vestiges of the other-tailed beasts within him. Their chakra a quiet chorus in his soul. They shared their millennia of wisdom, their perspectives on this new world and its wild, untamed magic. He began to analyze it, to understand its fundamental differences from chakra. Chakra was the spiritual and physical energy of the self, molded by will. Magic, he realized, was the energy of the world itself, pulled into the self and given form by emotion. It was less disciplined, more chaotic, but in some ways, more potent. He learned not to fight it, but to harmonize with it, letting the natural energy of sage mode act as a bridge between the two. His control over his own power deepened, becoming quieter, more instinctual, less about overwhelming force and more about absolute precision. He was being reforged in the golden light. The last vestiges of the hyperactive, knuckle-headed ninja burned away, leaving the man, the leader, the Hokage he was always meant to be. When he thought of fairy tale, of Lucy's unwavering spirit, Juvia's fierce devotion, and Cana's hidden strength, it was not with the detached affection of a newcomer. It was with the deep, abiding love of a man for his family. This was his home now, and he would protect it. And then, after an eternity and an instant, the light began to fade. A new sensation broke through the golden calm, the telltale thrum of a magical engine. The world returned with a gasp. One moment they were facing a dragon, the next they were lying on the soft grass of Tenro Island, the sun warming their faces. The members of Blue Pegasus stood over them, their faces a mixture of shock and disbelief. "They're alive," Ichiya shouted, his voice oddly strained. "It's a miracle, men." The Tenro team slowly picked themselves up, groaning. "What happened?" Natsu asked, rubbing his head. "Did we win?" "You've been gone," a solemn voice said. It was Biska, older now, a new maturity in her eyes. "All of you, for 7 years." The words hit them like a physical blow. 7 years, a lifetime. They had been frozen, while the world, their friends, their families, had moved on without them. The victorious return became a somber, silent journey home. The reality of their situation began to sink in, a cold, creeping dread that overshadowed the joy of their survival. Nothing could have prepared them for what they found. The Fairy Tale Guild Hall, once a proud, boisterous landmark in Magnolia, was gone. In its place stood a small, shabby tavern huddled in a back alley, its sign faded and peeling. Fairy Tale, it read, but the name was a sad joke. Inside, the place was mostly empty. Macau, his hair now streaked with gray, sat at the bar, his face etched with the weariness of a man who had fought a losing battle for too long. A handful of the guild's minor members were scattered at tables, their expressions defeated. And then there was Romeo, Macau's son. The small boy they remembered was gone, replaced by a brooding teenager whose eyes were filled with 7 years of anger and resentment. "So, you finally decided to come back," he said, his voice dripping with scorn. He looked at his father. "Are you happy now? The people who abandoned us are finally home." The weight of their failure, of their absence, crashed down on the Tenro team. They learned of the dead ode to a smug new guild, Twilight Ogre, who had preyed on them for 7 years. They saw the faded glory, the lost pride. Natsu raged. Urza stood in stoic, heartbroken silence, and Lucy wept for the time they had lost, for the friends who had suffered in their stead. The joyful reunion had become a wake. While the others were swept away in a tide of shock and grief, Naruto stood in the center of the dilapidated room, his expression calm. He had already processed this. He had had 7 years. He listened to Macau's story. He saw Romeo's pain, and he felt the guild's despair. And then, he acted. He walked over to a wall where the plaster had crumbled, revealing the rotted wood beneath. He placed a hand on it, and with a quiet grunt of effort, ripped the entire rotten section away, letting it clatter to the floor. The sound was like a gunshot in the silent, miserable room. Everyone turned to stare at him. He looked at the hole he had made, then at the shocked faces around him. "This is our home," he said, his voice quiet but carrying an absolute, unshakable conviction. "It's broken, so we fix it." He turned and walked outside. He found a pile of discarded lumber behind the building, hefted a heavy, solid beam onto his shoulder with an ease that defied its weight, and carried it back inside. He set it down, found a hammer and nails, and began to work. The rhythmic thud of his hammer was the only sound. It was a sound of purpose, of defiance. It was the sound of a man who refused to be beaten. One by one, the members of the Tenro team looked at him, then at each other. A spark ignited in Natsu's eyes. Urza's shoulders straightened. Gray clenched his fist. The despair began to recede, replaced by a slow burning fire. They had been lost, but now they were found. Their home was broken, but they were the ones who would fix it. The weeks that followed were a blur of hard work and quiet reconnection. The rebuilding of Fairy Tale was not just a physical task, it was the reforging of its soul. Naruto was the silent, steady heart of it all. He worked from dawn until dusk, his clones multiplying their efforts, repairing the structure with a speed and skill that was inhuman. But his real work was in rebuilding the people. Lucy was hit the hardest by the news from the outside world. She received a stack of letters, sent to her old apartment year after year, all from her father, Jude. They were filled with birthday gifts, words of pride, and a deepening loneliness. The last one was from his executor. Jude Heartfilia had passed away a month before their return. Naruto found her on the riverbank where her old apartment used to be, clutching the letters, her body shaking with silent sobs. He didn't offer words of comfort. He simply sat beside her, a quiet, solid presence against the backdrop of the setting sun. "I hated him for so long," she whispered, her voice raw. "And when I was finally ready to forgive him, he was gone. I never got to tell him." "He knew," Naruto said softly. He tapped the stack of letters. He knew. He stayed with her as she cried, not trying to stop the tears, but simply sharing the weight of her grief. Later, when her sorrow had ebbed, leaving a hollow ache, he spoke again. "We need to find out where he's buried. You should go see him." The task was daunting. 7 years of records were a mess. But Naruto deployed 100 shadow clones, a silent army of information gatherers that descended on the archives of every town in Fury. In 2 days, they had the location of Jude's modest grave. Naruto went with her, standing a respectful distance away as she finally had the conversation she had been denied. In that shared journey through her grief, their bond deepened into something profound, a partnership built on a quiet, unspoken understanding of loss. Juvia, meanwhile, threw herself into the rebuilding with a singular focus. She used her water magic to mix cement, clean the grime of 7 years, and even create intricate, beautiful water sculptures to raise the guild's morale. She and Naruto often worked side by side, a silent, efficient team. In the quiet rhythm of their work, she began to talk. She spoke of her childhood, of the endless rain, of the loneliness that had been her only companion before Phantom Lord, and then before Fairy Tail. Naruto listened. He didn't judge, he simply nodded, and in return, he shared small pieces of his own story. "I know what it's like," he told her one afternoon as they repaired the roof. "To have everyone look at you like you're a monster, or a curse. To feel like your very presence brings misfortune." Juvia stopped working, her blue eyes wide. He wasn't just sympathizing, he knew. For the first time, she began to see past her own narrative of obsessive love. She saw Naruto Uzumaki, a man who understood her in a way she had never thought possible. Her devotion, once a frantic, desperate thing aimed solely at Gray, began to change, to mellow into a deep, powerful, and steady affection for the quiet man who made the rain stop. Cana's journey was different. With the burden of her secret lifted, she seemed adrift. The drinking was still there, but the desperate edge was gone. She watched Naruto work, a thoughtful, appraising look in her eyes. One evening, he approached him as he was going over the guild's pathetic account books. "We're broke," she stated, pointing at the sea of red numbers. "Rebuilding is one thing, but we can't pay back Twilight Ogre, let alone eat." "I know," Naruto said, rubbing his temples. "I'm not exactly an expert in finance." A slow, predatory grin spread across Cana's face. "No, but I am an expert in cards." "And you," she said, poking him in the chest, "are an expert in seeing things people don't want you to see. I heard about a high-stakes poker tournament in the gambling town of Ryukyu. The prize money would solve all our problems. It was a reckless, insane plan. It was perfect. The tournament was held in a lavish, underground casino, filled with shady characters and powerful mages who used their abilities to cheat. Cana and Naruto were an unstoppable force. She was a master of the game, reading odds and psyching out opponents. He was her secret weapon. With his sensory abilities, he could feel the slightest flutter in a person's pulse when they were bluffing, the minute surge of magic when a card sharp tried to manipulate the deck. He fed her the information with a subtle gesture, a slight shift in his posture. A quiet word that sounded like a drink order. They were a symphony of deception and intuition. Her flirtatious banter and his quiet intensity created a mesmerizing dynamic that threw their opponents completely off balance. In the final round, against a smirking crime lord who was using telepathy to read minds, Naruto simply flooded the man's head with the memory of facing down Acknowledge. The man folded instantly, his face pale and slick with sweat. They walked out with a suitcase full of jewels, laughing. In the thrill of their shared victory, the potent chemistry that had been simmering between them finally sparked. She pulled him into an alley, the scent of ale and victory on her breath, and kissed him. It wasn't a gentle, tender kiss. It was fierce, passionate, and full of a wild, joyful energy. Naruto, surprised for a moment, returned it, a genuine, unburdened smile on his face. In a sterile, hidden office deep within the Magic Council's headquarters, a ruthless agent named Lahar reviewed a file. The agent who had been monitoring Tenro Island was now officially listed as missing, presumed deceased. Lahar pulled up the agent's last frantic report, analysis of the creature made of pure magic, and a final, odd description of the man called Uzumaki, who had not destroyed it, but unmade it. Lahar made a new entry in the file. Subject was present during the Tenro Island incident and survived 7 years in Fairy Sphere with no discernible aging or degradation of abilities. His power source remains unknown, but its scale is unprecedented. He is to be reclassified. He typed in a new designation, Arch 1. A classification reserved for threats to the entire continent. A threat on the same level as Zerf. He then opened a new directive, sanctioning the formation of a secret elite task force with a single, chilling objective. Monitor the target, and if he posed a threat to the established order, neutralize him by any means necessary. The last nail was hammered into the new sign above the door. The Fairy Tale Guild Hall stood proud and whole once more, larger and stronger than before. Inside, a party was in full swing, the energy more vibrant and hopeful than it had been in nearly a decade. As the sun began to set, casting long, golden rays over Magnolia, Naruto slipped away to the newly finished roof. He needed a moment of quiet. He wasn't alone for long. First Lucy appeared, a plate with a slice of Urza's cake in her hand. Then Juvia, holding 2 glasses of water. And finally Cana, carrying a large, heavy tankard of ale. They didn't speak. They simply settled around him. A comfortable, easy silence falling between them. Lucy leaned her head on his shoulder, Juvia sat close enough that their arms were touching, and Cana clinked her mug against his arm in a silent toast. He looked at them, these 3 remarkable, powerful, and beautifully complicated women who had become his anchors in this strange new world. He looked out at the town, the guild hall below filled with the sound of his family laughing. A genuine, deep-seated peace settled in his heart. For the first time, he was truly home. But far away, in a forgotten, shadowy ruin where the fabric of reality was thin. A change was occurring. The formless, hateful remnant of Kagaya's will, which had been slowly drawing in the ambient magical energy of Earth-land for 7 years, finally reached a critical mass. It coalesced, pulling dust and shadow and raw magic into itself, sculpting a form. It was a perfect, androgynous figure, its skin like pale marble and its eyes empty voids. It took its first breath of a new reality. Its first conscious thought was not a plan or a desire. It was a name, an echo of the one who had cast it into the void, the source of the only power that had ever defied its original self. Uzumaki. The Weaver had awoken. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Grand Magic Games and the Shadow of a Crown. The news landed in the newly rebuilt guild hall like a thunderclap, the Grand Magic Games. An annual tournament to decide the strongest guild in all of Fury. For 7 years, while they were gone, Fairy Tail had been the perennial last-place finisher, a running joke. A sad shadow of its former glory. We have to enter, Natsu roared, slamming a fist into his palm, flames erupting around it. We'll show them. We'll show all of them that we're back. The sentiment was explosive, catching fire instantly among the Tenro team. But a heavy silence fell over the rest of the guild. Macau, his face a roadmap of weary years, looked down into his mug. Wakaba blew a smoke ring that seemed to sag with defeat. It's not that simple, Natsu, Macau said, his voice rough. The other guilds, they've gotten stronger. A lot stronger. And Sabretooth, they're monsters. We'd be humiliated. So what? Natsu shot back. We run and hide. We let them keep calling us losers. That's not what Fairy Tail does. The argument raged, a clash between the fiery, ardent spirits of the returned and the ground down, pragmatic souls of those who had endured. It was Naruto who brought the debate to a halt. He had been listening, leaning against a newly installed support beam, his arms crossed. He's right, Naruto said, his voice cutting through the noise. Every head turned to him. We can't hide. A home isn't just walls and a roof. It's pride. It's a name you can say without flinching. Right now, our name is covered in mud. It's time to wash it off. His words, calm and measured, carried more weight than Natsu's fiery shouts. He wasn't talking about winning or losing. He was talking about dignity. Makarov, who had been watching from the bar, slammed his fist down. The boy is right. We will enter the games. We will climb back to the top. And we will show this kingdom that the spirit of Fairy Tail has not been broken. A roar of approval, hesitant at first, then growing in power, shook the hall. The decision was made. Urza stepped forward to announce the team that would represent them. Natsu, Gray, Lucy, and myself, she declared, her voice ringing with authority. She then paused, her gaze sweeping the room before landing squarely on Naruto. And for our 5th member, Naruto. His power is undeniable, but more importantly, his strategic mind will be our greatest asset. He will be our anchor. A week of intense, almost frantic training followed. They journeyed to a celestial spirit world beach, a place where time flowed differently, giving them 3 months of training in a single day. Naruto didn't focus on raw power. He ran the team through endless drills, forcing them to learn to fight not as 5 powerful individuals, but as a single, cohesive unit. He taught Lucy how to anticipate Natsu's reckless charges and support them, Gray. How to use his ice to control the battlefield for Urza's assaults. He was relentless, a quiet, demanding commander who pushed them to be smarter, faster, and more efficient. When they finally arrived in the capital city of Crocus, the air was thick with the energy of 1,000 competing magics. The Domus Flow, the arena for the games, was a magnificent, jaw-dropping structure. But the reception they received was chilling. The crowds jeered, calling them has-beens, failures. The once mighty fairy tale was an object of pity and scorn. Natsu's fists clenched, but Naruto placed a calming hand on his shoulder. "Let them," he murmured, his eyes fixed on the arena. "We'll change their minds." The first day's event, Hidden, was a disaster. Gray, a master of creation magic, was soundly defeated by a member of Raven Tail, Makarov's son's Dark Guild, who used some kind of memory-wiping magic. It was a humiliating start, and the team's morale plummeted. That night, Naruto gathered them in their inn. He didn't beat Gray with power, Naruto stated, his voice a calm anchor in their sea of disappointment. He used a trick. We were unprepared. That won't happen again. We learn from this, and we move on. His quiet confidence was infectious, stamping out the embers of their doubt. The second day brought the infamous chariot race, a brutal marathon atop a convoy of rumbling wagons. Natsu and Gajeel were immediately crippled by their motion sickness, leaving them in the dust. But it also brought the first of the one-on-one battles. And a special announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer, Chapati Lola, boomed. "We have a special treat for you today. An exhibition match, pitting a new, rising star against the Magic Council's own elite anti-mage task force, Rune." Down in the waiting area, Naruto's head snapped up. On the Lacrima Vision screen, his own face appeared. A quiet, deadly premonition slid down his spine. This wasn't random. It was a test. He walked into the arena to a smattering of confused applause. Across from him stood 3 individuals in the dark, severe uniforms of the Rune Knights. They moved with a synchronized, disciplined grace that spoke of elite training. "This is a data-gathering mission," Lahar said, watching from a private box high above, his eyes narrowed. "Engage, analyze, and confirm the nature of his power. Do not underestimate him." The match began. The Rune Knights didn't waste a moment. One of them, a woman with sharp eyes, made a series of complex hand signs. "Analyze." A web of magical energy shot towards Naruto, designed to read his magical signature. The second, a burly man, stomped his foot, and chains made of magic sealing energy erupted from the ground. The third, a lithe man with twin daggers, vanished in a burst of speed, reappearing behind Naruto for a killing blow. It was a perfect, coordinated assault meant to analyze, bind, and neutralize a target in seconds. It failed completely. The analysis spell washed over Naruto and returned a single, impossible reading. Null. There was no magic to analyze. The sealing chains shot up, but Naruto was no longer there. He had taken a single, almost lazy side step. The assassin's daggers swiped through empty air. Before they could reorient, Naruto moved. He didn't use a Rasengan. He didn't use a clone. He used pure, unadulterated taijutsu, honed by a lifetime of war. He flowed between them like water. A blur of motion. He struck the assassin with an open palm strike to the chest that sent him flying, the air driven from his lungs. He spun, grabbing the chain user's arm, and used his own momentum to throw him into the analyst. He moved with a brutal, elegant efficiency that was breathtaking. He never used a single spell. He never flared a single ounce of what they would call magic. He dismantled the elite squad with his bare hands in under 30 seconds. He stood over their unconscious forms, his breathing perfectly even, and looked up directly at Lahar's observation box. His amber eyes cold and clear. The message was unmistakable. "I know what you're doing. Stop it." Lahar felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. The subject court had defeated his best without using any discernible magic at all. The threat classification was not high enough. The crowd was stunned into silence, then erupted into a mixture of boos and confused cheers. Naruto walked out of the arena. His mission accomplished. He had shown them power, but he had revealed nothing. The next official event was the naval battle, a contest of last mage standing inside a giant sphere of water. Juvia was Fairy Tail's chosen participant. As she entered the sphere, her eyes sought out not Gray, but Naruto in the stands. He gave her a single, confident nod. Juvia was a force of nature. She wasn't the timid, uncertain girl from the Tower of Heaven. Her love for her friends, her burning desire to restore the guild's honor, and the quiet validation she had received from Naruto had forged her into something new. She was no longer just the Rain Woman, she was the ocean itself. She defeated opponent after opponent, her control over the water absolute. In the final moments, against Sabretooth's powerful celestial wizard, Yukino, she unleashed a new spell, a swirling vortex of pure, heartfelt power. For the guild I love, she thought, her inner voice a roar of conviction. For the friends who took me in. For him, who saw my heart and not just my reign. She won. The victory was decisive, absolute. Later, in the quiet tunnels beneath the arena, Naruto found her. I saw you out there, he said. His voice soft. It wasn't just your magic that won. It was your heart. It makes your power shine, Juvia. It was incredible. A brilliant, genuine smile lit up her face. He hadn't praised her for being strong for Gray's sake. He had praised her. It meant more to her than anything. The next battle was Lucy versus Flare Corona of Raven Tail. The fight was brutal. Flare's hair magic was versatile and cruel, but Lucy fought back with a skill and power that surprised everyone, summoning two spirits at once. She was winning. She was preparing to unleash her ultimate spell, Urano Matria, a power that would have guaranteed her victory. And then Flare played her trump card. A lock of her burning hair snaked out of the arena, unseen by the crowd, and wrapped itself around the leg of Asuka. Bisca and Alzak's young daughter. Forfeit the match, Flare's voice hissed across the arena, audible only to Lucy. Or the little girl gets burned. Lucy's magic faltered. Horror and helplessness washed over her. She couldn't win. She couldn't fight back. She was trapped. In the stands, Naruto went completely still. His sensory abilities, always active, felt the thin tendril of malicious magic snake out towards the child. He felt Lucy's terror, her despair. A cold, lethal fury, the kind he hadn't felt since the war, washed over him. He wouldn't let his friends be tortured. He wouldn't let a child be threatened. He lifted one hand under the cover of the railing. He gathered a minuscule, almost undetectable amount of wind nature chakra, compressed it into a needle-thin blade, and flicked it. The blade of air shot across the stadium, faster than sight, and severed Flare's magical hair an inch from Asuka's leg. Flare gasped, her control broken. But it was too late. Another member of Raven Tail, Obra, nullified Lucy's magic completely, and a final attack from Flare sent her to the ground, defeated. Fairy Tail had lost the match. But as Naruto watched Lucy being carried to the infirmary, his eyes were like chips of ice. He found her an hour later, awake and staring at the ceiling. I lost, she whispered, tears in her eyes. No, you didn't, he said, his voice a low, fierce growl. He sat on the edge of her bed. You were being blackmailed. You chose to protect someone. You made the right choice. In a real battle, that's the only victory that matters. He placed his hand over hers. His anger was gone, replaced by a deep, protective warmth that seeped into her very bones. He hadn't saved her from losing. He had saved her from an impossible choice, and he was proud of her for it. In that moment, her admiration for him deepened into something far more powerful. The fourth day brought the MPF, the Magical Power Finder. A device that measured a mage's magical output. The scores were high, with even Sabretooth's Organonagir posting an impressive 3,825. When it was Fairy Tail's turn, a slightly tipsy Cana swaggered up to the machine. The crowd laughed, but Naruto watched her with a calm, steady gaze. He saw her stance, the one he had drilled into her. He saw the absolute focus in her eyes behind the mask of drunken nonchalance. This wasn't a party trick. This was a demonstration. Cana held up her arm, the fairy glitter tattoo glowing. She took a deep breath, and unleashed it. The resulting explosion of light was blinding, the power so immense it shook the entire arena. The numbers on the MPF spun wildly, before finally settling on a score that broke the machine, 9,999. The stadium was silent for a beat, then exploded into a roar of disbelief and awe. Amidst the chaos, Cana's eyes found Naruto's in the stands. He gave her a slow, deliberate nod. A single gesture of profound approval. That was all she needed. His respect was her true prize. Throughout the games, Naruto felt a growing sense of unease. It was a faint, discordant hum at the edge of his senses. It grew stronger whenever he was near the Royal Knights, particularly the serious Arcadios and the fiery Dardan. He recognized the feeling. It was the scent of temporal mechanics, the faint wrongness of time being tampered with. It reminded him of the artifacts Jiraiya had told him about. Forbidden jutsu that played with the flow of history. It was connected, somehow, to a project they called Eclipse. The final day arrived. Through a combination of fierce battles and Naruto's brilliant on-the-fly strategies during the team-based main event, Fairy Tail had clawed its way back from last place. It all came down to a final, brutal showdown. Urza versus Minerva, the sea. Rule and powerful princess of Sabretooth. After a battle that left the entire stadium breathless, Urza emerged victorious. Fairy Tail had done it. They had won. They were the #1 guild in Fury again. The roar of the crowd was deafening, a wave of pure adoration that washed away 7 years of shame. But as the King of Fury stood to present them with the trophy, the ground began to tremble. A vast, dark portal, swirling with an unnatural, sickly light, tore open in the sky above the arena. It was the Eclipse Gate. It's finally open, Arcadios yelled, a frantic triumph in his voice. He dragons are here to save us from Zerf. Out of the portal, they came. Not one, but 7 massive dragons. But something was horribly, terrifyingly wrong. Their scales, instead of being vibrant jewel tones, were muted. Shot through with veins of a dull, gray crystal that seemed to absorb the light. Their movements were stiff, unnaturally synchronized. Their roars were a single, harmonious chord of destruction, with no individual rage or personality. And their eyes were vacant, glassy voids. Naruto's blood ran cold. He could feel it now, the source of the wrongness he had been sensing all week. It was the same sterile, orderly, emotionless energy he had felt in the vision on Tenro Island. "They're not alive," he murmured, his voice a grim whisper that was lost in the screams of the crowd. "They're puppets." The Weaver had made its move. The games were over. The war had just begun. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. A Requiem for Dragons. The victory celebration died in the throat of the world. One moment, the roar of the crowd was a wave of pure elation. The next, it was a tsunami of terror. The 7 dragons that tore through the Eclipse Gate were a perversion of everything the Dragon Slayers knew. They were magnificent, terrifying beasts of scale and fury, but their souls were hollow. Panic was a contagion, spreading faster than dragon fire. The cobbled streets of Crocus became a maelstrom of screaming civilians and desperate mages. Guilds that had been rivals moments before were now just collections of terrified people, their attacks against the dragons as effective as throwing stones at a mountain. A blast of fire from Sabretooth's Orga was simply absorbed into the gray-veined scales of a bronze dragon. A slash from Mermaid Heel's Kagura, a sword strike that could cut reality itself, scraped harmlessly off the crystalline hide of another. Natsu, Wendy, and Gajeel stood frozen on the arena floor, their faces pale with a unique, profound horror. "They don't have a scent," Wendy whispered, her voice trembling. "There's nothing inside them." While the kings and generals panicked and the mages fought and died in pointless, disorganized skirmishes, Naruto Uzumaki became terrifyingly calm. The chaos around him seemed to slow down, the screams fading into a dull roar. He stood atop the ruined wall of the Domus Flow, his eyes closed, his senses extended over the entire city. He wasn't seeing the chaos, he was seeing the pattern. The Jade Dragon in the west and the Obsidian Dragon in the south attacked in perfect sync. When the royal army advanced on the one torching the merchant district, another descended from behind, cutting off their retreat. Their movements were too precise, too coordinated. It was the cold, flawless logic of a single mind controlling 7 unstoppable weapons. This wasn't a rampage, it was a harvest. Every blast of magic, every exploding building, every scream of terror, all of it was releasing a torrent of emotional and magical energy that was being siphoned off. Drawn towards a single, unseen point, he opened his eyes, and they were the eyes of a man who had commanded armies and stared down gods. The time for observation was over. With a silent surge of chakra, 50 shadow clones appeared around him. They did not pause for orders. Each one already knew its mission. Go, was all he said. The clones blurred, vanishing from sight. One appeared before a stunned Makarov. Master, gather the guilds at the castle. We need to coordinate. Another found Leon Vastia of Lamia scale. Your ice is for containment. Create barriers along the eastern river to funnel civilians out. Do not engage directly. A third clone materialized in front of a shocked Kagura. Your speed is for rescue, not attack. Get everyone out of the Colosseum district. Now, one even found the new master of Sabretooth, Sting Eucliffe, as he was about to launch a suicidal attack. You and Rogue are decoys. You're fast enough to stay alive. Draw the Obsidian One's attention north, away from the evacuation routes. The clones were a whirlwind of command and control, a nervous system laid over a city in chaos. His voice, calm and authoritative, cut through the panic, giving purpose to the powerful and hope to the helpless. For the first time since the dragons appeared, the tide of the battle began to shift from a rout to a strategic defense. The real Naruto leapt from the wall, landing silently in a debris-strewn plaza. He was heading for the source of the control he could now faintly sense. But his path was blocked. A dragon, this one a hulking beast of living rock and jade, descended, its landing shattering the cobblestones. Its vacant, glassy eyes fixed on him. Before he could move, a flurry of cards spun through the air, embedding themselves in the ground around the dragon. Sleep storm, paralyzing fog. Cana landed beside him, her expression a mixture of fear and fierce determination. Looks like you could use a partner. Avenue of water slammed into the dragon's side, not to injure it, but to throw it off balance. Juvia skidded to a stop on his other side, her hands already glowing. Juvia will not let you fight alone. From above, a golden gate opened. Taurus, Virgo, Lucy yelled, sliding down a slide of earth Virgo had created. We're a team, remember. You're not getting rid of us that easily. They formed a semicircle around him, their backs to his. A small island of defiance in a city on fire. Naruto looked at each of them. Cana's unwavering resolve, Juvia's fierce devotion, Lucy's unbreakable spirit, and A.F. Ealing of profound warmth spread through his chest. He wasn't just protecting a city. He was protecting them. It's a puppet, he said, his voice low and urgent, never taking his eyes off the stone dragon. It doesn't feel pain. It doesn't think. It just follows a script. We don't need to destroy it. We just need to break its connection to the puppeteer. The four of them moved as one, a symphony of perfectly synchronized combat. The dragon swiped with a claw the size of a carriage. Juvia will bind its legs. Juvia shouted. Water nebula. Two high-pressure jets of water shot out, wrapping around the dragon's ankles, causing it to stumble. I'll give you a bigger target. Lucy commanded. Taurus, hit it high. Virgo, dig. The giant minotaur slammed his axe into the creature's shoulder, a noisy but harmless distraction, while Virgo created a massive pit right in front of its stumbling feet. My turn, Cana yelled, flipping through her cards. It's focusing on them. Illusion card. Shining mockery. A dozen glittering, duplicate Narutos appeared, scattering across the plaza. The dragon's head whipped around, its programming confused by the multiple identical targets. It was the opening. Naruto moved. He flowed through the chaos, a golden blur of Sage Mode energy. He used the dragon's own clumsiness against it, running up its stumbling leg and along its back. He saw it then. A cluster of the dull gray crystals embedded near the base of the dragon's skull, pulsing with the weaver's sterile energy. The control node. He drew back his fist, not for a Rasengan, but for a precise, focused strike. A scalpel of pure sage energy. He slammed his knuckles into the crystal cluster. For a single, breathtaking moment, the dragon's body went rigid. The glassy emptiness in its eyes was replaced by a flicker of something ancient and terrified, its own consciousness, screaming from within its prison. Then, the gray light flared, the control reasserted itself, and it thrashed wildly, throwing Naruto from its back. He landed lightly on the ground, his expression grim. He had his answer. The crystals were the key. But that flicker of life, of a real soul trapped within the puppet, changed everything. "I can't kill them," he said to the women as they regrouped around him. "They're alive. They're victims, just like the people in the city. I have to free them." A new plan, audacious and terrifyingly dangerous, bloomed in his mind. It was a massive gamble, a technique he had never attempted on this scale. "I can create a seal," he explained, his voice urgent. "A kind of purge. It won't harm the dragons. But it will sever the Weaver's control over them. But I'll need to be at the highest point in the city, and it will take all of my concentration. I'll be a sitting duck." He looked at them, his gaze intense. "The other dragons, they'll come for me. All of them. I need you to buy me time. I need you to protect me. No matter what." There was no hesitation, not a flicker of doubt. 3 voices answered as one. Of course. The top of the Domus Flow was a windswept ruin, offering a panoramic view of the burning city and the 7 rampaging dragons. Naruto sat cross-legged in the very center, the wind whipping through his blonde hair. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and sank into the natural energy of the world. Lucy, Juvia, and Cana formed a protective triangle around him. They looked at each other, a grim, unspoken promise passing between them. They were his only shield against the apocalypse. Naruto's hands flew through a series of complex hand signs, a forgotten art in this world of magic. He slammed his palms onto the stone beneath him. Sage art. Myriad Truth's liberation seal. A wave of golden energy, intricate and complex as a spider's web, erupted from him. It didn't explode, it grew. It spread across the sky over Crocus, a vast, shimmering dome of light covered in swirling, indecipherable script. It was a declaration of war against the Weaver's control. And the Weaver answered. The 7 dragons stopped their rampage. As one, they turned their heads, their vacant eyes fixing on the golden light and the lone figure at its heart. With 7 harmonious, soul-chilling roars, they took to the sky, flying towards the arena. Towards him. "Here they come," Cana muttered, her knuckles white as she gripped her deck of cards. "They will not touch him," Juvia declared, a storm of water already swirling around her. "For our friends," Lucy cried, her gate keys glowing. "For our future." What followed was not a battle. It was a desperate, beautiful, and utterly hopeless stand. The first dragon, the Obsidian one, descended, its maw opening to unleash a torrent of shadow and gravity. "Open, gate of the water bearer. Aquarius," Lucy screamed, stabbing the golden key forward. The mermaid spirit appeared, her usual foul temper replaced by a grim understanding of the stakes. She and Juvia combined their power, creating a massive, swirling tsunami that met the dragon's shadow breath in a cataclysmic explosion of steam and darkness. While the sky was obscured, Cana laid her traps. Web of the sleeping giant. Field of binding light. Dozens of cards laid a net of pure magic across the approach to the rooftop. The jade dragon flew straight into it, its momentum arrested for a precious few seconds as the magical energy clung to it. It wasn't enough. Another dragon, wreathed in lightning, swooped in from the side. Lucy summoned Loke and Ares, who put up a valiant but quickly overwhelmed defense. The lightning blast tore through them, eating straight for the motionless Naruto. "Water dome," Juvia screamed, creating a sphere of super-dense water around him. The lightning hit it and was diffused, the water exploding into a cloud of superheated steam. Juvia cried out, the feedback searing her arms, but she held her ground. They fought with a synergistic brilliance born of absolute trust. Lucy's spirits would create a distraction, Cana would lay a trap to exploit it. And Juvia would provide the raw, elemental defense. They were holding off 7 forces of nature, their magic and life force bleeding away with every passing second. They were bruised, battered, and nearing their limits, but they did not yield. They were a shield of loyalty, and they would not break. Inside their desperate defense, Naruto was fighting his own battle. He poured his very essence into the seal, his life force the ink that wrote the formula of freedom across the sky. It wasn't an attack, it was an appeal. He connected with the captive consciousness of each dragon, showing them not his own memories, but the beauty of the world they were being forced to destroy. The laughter of a child, the loyalty of a guild, the warmth of the sun, the taste of freedom. It was a requiem for their lost souls, a song of pure empathy sung in a language of golden light. The seal pulsed, reaching its crescendo. The dragons seemed to feel it, their assault becoming more frantic, more desperate. A final, combined blast from all seven broke through the women's defenses. They stood, bloodied and exhausted, a final, defiant wall of flesh and bone between the attack and the man they loved. The blast never hit. The golden light of the seal imploded, drawing inwards and then exploding outwards in a silent, perfect wave of liberation. The light washed over the dragons. The dull, gray crystals all over their bodies didn't just break, they sublimated, turning to harmless dust on the wind. Vibrant, living color flooded back into their scales. Their eyes, once vacant voids, blazed to life with ancient intelligence and profound confusion. They were free. The seven dragons hovered in the air for a moment, looking down at the burning city, then at the man who had freed them. They let out seven distinct, individual roars, not of rage, but of acknowledgement. And then, as one, they turned and flew back through the still open eclipse gate, retreating from a world that was not their own. The city was saved. On the rooftop, the three women sagged, their energy spent. But their relief turned to horror as Naruto collapsed, his body slumping to the ground, faint wisps of smoke rising from him. His sage mode was gone. He had poured too much of his own life force into the seal. They rushed to his side. But as they knelt over his unconscious form, a shadow fell over them. The air grew cold, still, and heavy with an unnatural silence. They looked up. Hovering in the sky above them was a figure. It was tall, androgynous, and sculpted from a pale, light absor. Being material that was not quite flesh and not quite stone. Its face was a mask of serene, terrifying perfection, and its eyes were empty voids that held the coldness of a dead universe. It had been born from the magic it had just harvested. It looked down at the weakened Naruto, its head tilting with a dispassionate curiosity. Its voice, when it spoke, was not one voice, but a chorus of 1,000 emotionless whispers. Speaking in perfect, chilling harmony. The anomaly must be corrected, the Weaver stated, not as a threat, but as a simple, undeniable fact. The chaos must end. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The Weight of Two Worlds. The Weaver's presence was an anti-sound, a profound silence that swallowed the crackle of the burning city and the distant cries of the wounded. It did not radiate power in the way a mage did. It was a gravity well of pure order, pulling the chaos of the world into its perfect, terrifying stillness. The very air around it seemed to lose its color, fading to shades of gray. Lucy, Juvia, and Cana scrambled to their feet, instinctively forming a wall in front of Naruto's unconscious body. They were running on fumes, their magical reserves scraped dry, their bodies bruised and aching. But they stood unwavering, a ragged, defiant line against a god. "Get away from him," Cana growled, her voice a low rasp. She held up her cards, but her hands were trembling, not with fear, but with sheer exhaustion. The Weaver's void-like eyes drifted over them, its expression unchanging. Irrelevant variables, it chimed, its choral voice devoid of malice or contempt. It was a simple assessment. Your emotional outputs are inefficient. You are a source of chaos. You require correction. It raised a hand. It did not gather energy or chant an incantation. Reality simply bent. The air in front of the women warped, compressing into a lens of pure, crushing force aimed directly at Naruto. "No, you don't," Lucy screamed, thrusting her last ounce of power into her ki. "Open, Gate of the Golden Bull." Taurus. The giant spirit appeared, bellowing his usual lecherous praise for Lucy's body before swinging his axe at the distortion. The axe, a weapon of immense magical power, simply stopped a foot from the target, its momentum completely absorbed. Then, with a sickening groan, the axe began to unravel, its magical essence unmaking itself, turning to dust. Taurus cried out in pain and vanished as his connection to the world was severed. The Weaver had not blocked the attack. It had erased the logic that allowed the attack to exist. The three women stared in horror. How could they fight something that could rewrite the rules of their reality? But the Weaver's attack never landed. A new force intervened. A line of shimmering, intricate seals, the color of blood, appeared in the air between the Weaver and the rooftop. The lens of distorted space hit the seals and shattered, dissipating with a sound like breaking glass. Dozens of figures in the dark, uniforms of the Rune Knights appeared on the surrounding rooftops, led by a grim-faced Lahar. Beside him stood a man whose presence was a shock. Leon Vastja's cousin, Bastian, the pragmatic and Rut. HLESS head of the Council's most clandestine division. He was flanked by elite mages, their hands already glowing with the restrained power of complex, forbidden spells. By order of the Magic Council, Bastian's voice boomed. Amplified by a magical device, entity designated, Weaver, your existence has been deemed a threat to the continent of Ishgar. Surrender now, or you will be neutralized. The Weaver turned its head, a slow, deliberate motion. It assessed the newcomers with the same dispassionate curiosity. The old order, its voices chimed. Your systems are predicated on conflict. Your laws are designed to manage chaos, not eliminate it. You are obsolete, so you admit to being the cause of this destruction. Lahar demanded. This was not destruction, the Weaver corrected. It was a harvest. The emotional and magical expenditure was necessary to achieve this state of physicality. Now, the true work can begin. A world without conflict, a world without pain, a perfect, silent, orderly world. From high above, a massive, complex magic circle, the size of a city block, blazed to life. It was the Council's ultimate weapon, a sealing spell that required the combined power of their 10 strongest mages. A spell not used since the days of the Dragon Civil War. Chains of Tartarus, Bastian commanded. Massive, ethereal chains erupted from the magic circle, converging on the Weaver from all sides. They were not mere magic. They were conceptual, designed to bind not just a body, but a being's very existence to a single point in space. The chains wrapped around the Weaver's pale form. For a moment, it seemed to work. The entity was held fast. The Weaver looked down at the chains, a flicker of something almost like interest in its void eyes. A crude but clever application of foundational laws, it observed. Then, it flexed its shoulders. The chains, which could have held a god, did not break. They dissolved. The perfect, orderly logic of the Weaver's own being simply overrode the chaotic, binding logic of the spell. A collective gasp went up from the Rune Knights. Bastian's face went white. Their trump card, the most powerful sealing spell known to man, had failed as if it were a child's parlor trick. Your attempts at control are illogical, the Weaver stated. It turned its attention back to Naruto's prone form. The anomaly is the source of the greatest chaos. Its existence invites conflict. Once it is corrected, I will begin the process of correcting the rest of this world. It began to descend towards the rooftop, its purpose absolute. The Rune Knights were powerless. The women of fairy tale were spent. Hope, which had burned so brightly just moments before, was extinguished. In the darkness of his own mind, Naruto was falling. He was adrift in a sea of his memories, reliving the weight of his two worlds. The sage energy he had expended had not just exhausted him, it had weakened the veil between his conscious mind and the deep, collective unconscious of the sage's power. He saw the faces of Jiraiya, of his mother and father, of Neji. Their smiles, their sacrifices. He felt the pain of their loss as keenly as the day it had happened. This is the world you fight for. A voice whispered. It was not Kurama. It was a serene, melodious voice that felt ancient and familiar. The voice of the Weaver, seeping into his mind. A world of endless, repeating pain. A cycle of hatred that you, yourself, perpetuated. Visions shifted. He saw his own battles. His clash with pain, which had leveled his home. His final, cataclysmic fight with Sasuke, which had torn a hole in reality. Your very presence creates chaos, the Weaver's voice continued, calm and reasonable. Your power draws conflict to it like a moth to a flame. You fight to protect smiles, but your battles create tears. There is a better way. The vision changed again. He saw a world of serene, crystalline cities under a perpetual, gentle twilight. He saw people moving with a quiet grace, their faces calm and untroubled. There was no laughter, but there was no weeping. There was no love, but there was no hate. It was a world of perfect, unshakable peace. A world without choice. I can give you this, the Weaver offered. Surrender your power, the source of this chaos. Let me correct the flaw in the system. Let me give your friends, and all the people of this world, a gift you never could, an end to suffering. It was the ultimate temptation. A world where no one would have to feel the pain he had felt. A world where his friends would be safe, forever. All he had to do was give up. Let go. He saw Lucy, her face etched with worry as she stood over his body. He saw Juvia, tears streaming down her face as she erected another desperate water shield. He saw Cana, spitting defiance at a god, her last drops of magic flaring like a dying star. They were in pain. They were terrified. They were exhausted. And they were so beautifully, stubbornly, chaotically alive. They chose to fight. They chose to feel. They chose to stand by a friend, even in the face of annihilation. Their love, their loyalty, their messy, illogical, glorious emotions, that was what he fought for. Not a perfect, sterile peace. A fire ignited in the depths of his soul, a golden light that burned away the gray twilight of the Weaver's vision. "You're wrong," Naruto's voice echoed through the mental landscape, not a shout, but a firm, unbreakable truth. Pain is how we learn. Loss is how we grow. And love is what makes it all worth fighting for. A world without it isn't peace. It's a cage. The vision shattered. Naruto's eyes snapped open. The first thing he saw was the terrified, determined faces of Lucy, Juvia, and Cana, standing over him like Valkyries. The second was the Weaver, descending, its hand outstretched to correct him. The third was the ring of stunned and helpless Rune Knights. He didn't leap to his feet. He didn't flare with power. He simply sat up, a quiet, weary movement that nonetheless drew every eye. He was drained, his reserves almost empty, but his will was a cold, hard diamond. He looked at the three women, and a soft, genuine smile touched his lips. "You did good," he said, his voice a little hoarse. "You can rest now." He got to his feet. He swayed for a moment, and Lucy reached out to steady him. He gave her hand a reassuring squeeze before stepping past them to face the Weaver. He stood before the entity, a battered man in tattered clothes against a pristine, reality-warping god. "So that was your sales pitch," Naruto said, his voice calm. "It was good, but I'm not buying." The Weaver paused, its hand hovering a few feet from Naruto's face. "Your logic is flawed. You are choosing chaos. I'm choosing freedom," Naruto countered. "It's messy. And it's better." He looked past the Weaver, his gaze sweeping over the Rune Knights until it found Bastion. "You," he called out, his voice sharp with command. "The one in charge. Your plan failed. Your enemy is still here. And right now, I'm the only thing standing between it and your city." Bastion stared, his mind reeling. This man, this anomaly, had woken from the brink of death and was now negotiating. "What do you propose?" Bastion asked, his voice tight. "An alliance," Naruto said simply. "A temporary one. You have information, resources. I have the power to actually fight this thing. You want to save your world. I want to save my friends. Our goals align." For now, it was an insane proposition. An arch-one threat, a being they were sanctioned to neutralize, was offering to lead them. But Bastion looked at their failed super weapon, at the unstoppable entity hovering before them, and at the unwavering certainty in Naruto's eyes. Their own logic had failed. Perhaps it was time to try his. "What do you need?" Bastion asked, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "Everything you know about ancient magic, dimensional rifts, and beings of pure energy," Naruto said. "And I need you to get every non-combatant out of this city. Now. This is about to become our battlefield." He turned back to the Weaver, a slow, predatory grin spreading across his face. It was the grin of a man who, against all odds, had found his footing. "All right, he said, cracking his knuckles. "You want to erase chaos. You want to correct the anomaly. Then come on." He took a deep breath, and a familiar, vibrant golden energy, drawn from the very life of the world around him, began to coalesce. Sage mode flared to life, not as a roaring inferno, but as a steady, controlled flame. Let's get messy. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The Weaver's Gambit. The war began not with a clash of armies, but with an insidious, creeping silence. Naruto's alliance with the Magic Council was an uneasy one, a shotgun marriage born of mutual desperation. Bastion, swallowing his pride, relocated a command center to the now fortified Fairy Tail Guild Hall, turning the bar into a massive strategy table. Rune Nai, TS and fairy tale mages worked side by side, a tense but surprisingly effective coalition. Naruto, with his clones acting as perfect information relays, was the undisputed commander of the global defense. He had to be. The Weaver's methods were terrifyingly subtle. It didn't raise cities. It corrected them. A fishing village in the far north didn't burn. Its people simply stopped feeling the cold, or joy, or hunger, becoming silent. Efficient automatons who worked until their bodies gave out. A vast forest in Bosco didn't die. Its trees and animals were transmuted into perfect, silent, crystal L-line structures that hummed with a sterile, orderly energy. The Weaver was a cancer, spreading a creeping, gray peace across the world, one that was arguably worse than any violent destruction. Naruto's strategy was one of containment and rescue. He dispatched teams, fairy tale mages paired with rune knight specialists, to evacuate regions before the correction could take hold. It was a desperate, globe-spanning race against an enemy that didn't need to travel. He, meanwhile, worked with the Council's top researchers, poring over ancient texts, trying to find a weakness. They made a breakthrough in a dusty, forgotten scroll. It has to have an anchor, Levi McGarden explained, her finger tracing a diagram of a dimensional rift. A being like that, a conceptual entity given form, can't just exist in our world. It has to be tethered to a point of entry, a place where the veil between worlds is thin. That's its core, its heart. If we can find it, we can sever its connection. Naruto closed his eyes, his brow furrowed in concentration as he extended his senses across the entire continent. He searched not for power, but for a void, a place where the world's natural energy was being drawn in. And he found it, a single, sickening point of suction, a familiar one. Harem, he said, his voice grim. The beach where I first woke up. That's where the rift was torn. That's its anchor. The mission was clear. They had to get him to Harem. He was the only one with the power to confront the Weaver at its core. But the Weaver knew. As soon as their forces began to mobilize, the entity shifted its strategy. It understood that Naruto's strength came not just from his own power, but from the bonds he shared with his comrades. So, it decided to break them. The Weaver did not attack their minds with illusions. It crafted entire pocket realities, perfect, personalized worlds built from the deepest, most secret desires and insecurities of its targets, knowledge it had gleaned from Naruto's own mind during their brief connection. Lucy found herself not on a dusty road to Harem, but in her father's grand mansion. It was warm, bright, and filled with the scent of old books and fresh tea. And sitting in his favorite armchair, a newspaper in his lap, was Jude Hartfilia. He looked up and smiled, a genuine, loving smile she had ached for her entire life. Lucy, darling, he said, his voice warm. You're just in time for your book launch party. We're all so proud of you. There was no fairy tale, no magic, no chaos, just this, a perfect, peaceful life where she was a successful author, cherished by a father who had never pushed her away. She could feel the truth of it, the deep, satisfying rightness of this reality. She found herself smiling, the tension of the war melting away. This was what she had always wanted. But then, she saw it. Out the window, the sky was a flat, unchanging shade of gray. The servants moved with a silent, flawless grace, their faces devoid of expression. There was no laughter, no arguments, no life. She looked at her father's loving smile, and for the first time, she saw that it never changed. It was a perfect, static mask. This was peace, but it wasn't real. A wave of revulsion and defiance washed over her. This isn't my home, she whispered. She thought of Natsu setting her kitchen on fire, of Urza's terrible attempts at acting, of Kana's drunken singing. She thought of Naruto's quiet, unwavering belief in her. That was her life, a chaotic, messy, imperfect, and beautiful life. I choose my family, she said, her voice ringing with a power that was all her own. She slammed her hand on the table. And my family is fairy tale. The perfect world shattered like glass, and she found herself back on the road to Harem, gasping for breath. The gray memory of a false peace already fading. Juvia was standing in the rain. It was a cold, miserable downpour, the kind that had followed her for her entire childhood. She was alone in a vast, gray city, and the weight of a loneliness so profound it was a physical agony pressed down on her. She saw figures in the distance. Gray, Leon, the members of Fairy Tail, but when she called out to them, they turned. Their faces filled with disgust and fear. Monster, they hissed. Rain woman, go away. Then, another Juvia appeared before her. This one was different. She was taller, her body seemingly made of the storm itself. Her eyes glowing with a cold, blue light. Water swirled around her, a vortex of pure, untamed despair. This is our truth, the water Juvia said, her voice the rumble of a distant storm. We are alone. We bring only misery. Why do you fight it? Embrace it. Let the world drown in our sorrow. It is the only power we have ever truly known. Juvia looked at this perfect, powerful embodiment of her own past, her own fear. And she remembered. She remembered Naruto kneeling before her in that cave, not judging her, not trying to fix her, but sharing her pain. She remembered him telling her that her heart was what made her magic shine. Her emotions weren't a curse. They were her greatest strength. No, Juvia said, her voice quiet but firm. Juvia is not alone anymore. She took a step forward. Not into the storm, but through it. My love is not a weakness. My heart is not a burden. Water, warm and clear, began to radiate from her. It pushed back against the cold, miserable rain. Juvia is a mage of Fairy Tail, and she will protect her family. She walked straight through her doppelganger of despair, and the storm dissolved into a bright, clear morning. She was back on the path, the sun warming her face. Cana was in a cozy, sun-drenched cottage. Gildarts sat across from her at a small wooden table, laughing as he clumsily tried to teach a small, dark-haired girl, her daughter, a simple card trick. The scene was a perfect, idyllic fantasy. The great Gildarts had given up his wandering, had settled down, and had become the father she had always dreamed of. Isn't this better? He asked, looking at Cana, his eyes filled with a peaceful, paternal love. No more chasing S-class. No more dangerous missions. Just us, a family. All you have to do is stay. It was a beautiful lie. It offered her everything she had ever cried herself to sleep over. But it came at a cost. In this world, she had never pushed herself. She had never trained with Naruto. She had never stood against a monster and found her own strength. She was happy, but she was less. She thought of the thrill of her victory at the poker tournament, the pride she felt when she shattered the MPF. The look of respect in Naruto's eyes. That was a strength she had earned. This was a weakness she was being offered as a gift. It's beautiful, she said, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. But it's not me. She stood up, her hand instinctively going to the deck of cards at her belt. My strength is my own. I earned it. My family is the one I chose, the one I fight for. Gildarts' loving expression faltered, becoming a mask of confusion. But this is everything you ever wanted. I wanted to be worthy of you, Cana replied, her voice strong. But I found out it's more important to be worthy of myself. The cottage, the daughter, the perfect father, they all faded away like a dream upon waking. While the three women fought their inner demons, Naruto fought a war on two fronts. The path to Harem was a gauntlet. The Weaver didn't just throw monsters at him, it used his own past, creating spectral, gray-marbled versions of his old enemies. He fought a silent, soulless pain, his 6 paths moving with the Weaver's perfect, coordinated logic. He battled a crystalline Kakuzu, whose elemental hearts were powered by the sterile energy of correction. He even faced a phantom Itachi, his Sharingan revealing not the truth, but the Weaver's perfect, orderly lie. Each battle was a brutal, draining affair. He wasn't just fighting their power, he was fighting the memories they represented. He defeated them, one by one, but each victory cost him. The Weaver was intentionally bleeding him dry, forcing him to expend his sage energy, weakening him for the final confrontation. He finally reached the white sand shores of Harem. The town was silent, crystalline, corrected. The sky above was a placid, storm-gray canvas. And standing on the beach where he had first arrived, at the heart of a shimmering, invisible vortex of suction, stood the Weaver. Its form was more defined now, sharper, more perfect. It had been absorbing the ambient magic of the world, growing stronger. Naruto was battered, exhausted, his chakra reserves dangerously low. He stumbled onto the sand, his breath coming in ragged gasps. You have failed, the Weaver's choral voice stated. Your allies have been corrected. Your strength is spent. Your chaotic influence ends now. It revealed its final gambit. It had not just been siphoning ambient magic. It had been subtly draining magic from every mage on the continent who wasn't actively resisting it. It now possessed a reservoir of power so vast it could rewrite reality on a global scale with a single thought. This world is flawed, it declared. A sphere of pure, gray energy coalescing in its hand. I will unmake it and start again. A perfect, silent genesis. You have one final chance. Join me. Help me create a world without pain. Or be erased with the rest of the mistakes. It was the end of the line. He was too weak. He had been outmaneuvered. But then, he heard them. 3 voices, calling his name. He turned. Lucy, Juvia, and Cana stood at the edge of the beach, having broken free of their prisons. They were weary, their own battles having taken a toll, but their eyes blazed with an unquenchable fire. They ran to his side, their presence a sudden, powerful surge of warmth and hope in the cold, gray air. Juvia erected a shield of water. Cana laid out a defensive perimeter of cards. Lucy summoned every spirit she had left. A small but defiant army of starlight. You're not alone, Naruto, Lucy said, her voice ringing with conviction. Juvia will always be by your side, Juvia added, her hand finding his. Looks like you're stuck with us. Golden boy, Cana grinned, shouldering up against him. They stood together, 4 flickering flames against a rising tide of sterile, gray oblivion. They were outnumbered, outmatched, and on the brink of annihilation. But they were together, and for the first time since the battle began, the Weaver's perfect, serene expression flickered with something akin to uncertainty. It did not understand. Its logic could not process the defiant, chaotic, and utterly illogical power of their bond. Chapter 9 End. Chapter 10. The dawn of a new tale. The Weaver stood before them, a monument to perfect, sterile order. The gray sphere of energy in its hand was not an attack, it was a statement of intent, the unmaking of a flawed universe. Naruto, flanked by the 3 women who had become his world, felt the last dregs of his sage energy gutter like a dying candle. Raw power wouldn't win this. It couldn't. Your unified emotional output is a fascinating, yet ultimately futile, display of chaotic energy. The Weaver's choral voice stated, its tone flat and analytical. It extended the sphere of gray null energy. It will be corrected, along with everything else. The gray light pulsed, not with heat or force, but with a profound and terrifying nothingness. It wasn't an attack that could be blocked by water or deflected by cards. It was an advancing wave of erasure, and as it washed over them, Lucy felt the memories of her mother begin to fade, their vibrant color draining away. Juvia felt her fierce devotion turning to cool indifference, the warmth she felt for her friends becoming a distant, logical calculation. Cana felt her loyalty, her fiery spirit, being replaced by a calm, placid acceptance of the inevitable. Their very selves were being unwritten. I can't remember my spirit's names. Lucy gasped, her keys feeling like cold, meaningless metal in her hand. Juvia doesn't feel anything, Juvia whispered, her eyes wide with a horror that was itself beginning to fade. This was how it ended. Not with a bang, but with a quiet, orderly fizzle into nothing. But then Cana, her mind being stripped of its sharp edges, felt a flicker of something stubborn and untamable. A memory of laughing with Naruto after their poker win, the raw, chaotic joy of it. It was an illogical, inefficient emotion. And it was the only thing real in a world turning gray. She clung to it. No, she snarled. The word a raw act of defiance. She grabbed Lucy's hand and Juvia's. Don't you dare let it win. Remember what it's trying to take from you. Her desperate plea. Was a spark in the encroaching darkness. Lucy thought of fairy tale, of the stupid, pointless, wonderful brawls. Juvia thought of Naruto's smile, the one that made the rain stop. Their magic, born from those very emotions the Weaver sought to erase, flared in rebellion. It hates this, Lucy realized, a frantic brilliance in her eyes. It hates how we feel. That's its weakness. Then let's give it something to hate, Cana grinned. A feral light returning to her expression. Let's show it the power of a fairy tale heart, Juvia declared, her own voice finding its strength. They didn't try to attack the Weaver. They turned their power inward, and then outward, towards each other. Lucy poured the starlight of her celestial magic, the very essence of the bonds she shared with her spirits, into the circle they had formed. Juvia unleashed the full, untamed ocean of her devotion, a torrent of pure, unwavering emotion. Cana wrapped it all together with her versatile, clever magic, weaving their feelings into a single, cohesive field of power. A wave of vibrant, chaotic, impossible color exploded from them. It was the brilliant gold of loyalty, the fierce crimson of passion, the deep, unshakable blue of devotion. It was a shield, not of force, but of pure, unadulterated feeling. The weaver's gray wave of erasure hit their emotional field and recoiled, the perfect stillness of its logic shattered by the beautiful, messy static of their hearts. The pressure on Naruto's mind lifted. He stood within the storm of their creation, protected by the very chaos the weaver despised. He looked at the three of them, standing together, their magic and souls intertwined, holding back a god not with power, but with love. He saw his path. He couldn't destroy the weaver. Levy's warning was clear. The entity was a battery, holding the stolen magic of their world. To destroy it would be to bleed their reality dry. Destruction was Sasuke's way. It was Madara's way. It had never been his. Keep it busy, he said, his voice quiet but absolute. He took a step forward, out of the protective aura, and walked towards the weaver. The entity, its primary weapon neutralized by the women's chaotic shield, focused its full attention on him. You cannot stop the correction, it chimed, its voice holding the barest hint of something dissonant, like a perfectly tuned instrument that had heard a wrong note. I'm not here to stop you, Naruto said, his eyes glowing with the last of his sage energy. I'm here to talk to the one in charge. He placed his hand on the weaver's chest. He didn't push. He didn't attack. He connected. He bypassed the cold, hard logic of the Kagaya remnant and reached deep inside, for the original spark. The dormant, pre-conscious god entity of Earth-land that had been hijacked. Used as a host for a foreign will. He opened his mind, his heart, his entire soul, and he showed it everything. It was not a memory reel. It was a torrent of pure sensation. He showed it he scraped knee he got when he first learned to walk, the sting of pain followed by the warmth of the third Hokage's gentle hand. He showed it the savory, salty perfection of a bowl of Ichiraku ramen, shared with Iruka after a hard day of training. He showed it the bitter, helpless grief of watching Jiraiya sink beneath the waves, a pain so profound it had reshaped his world. He showed it Lucy's fierce pride as she wrote her novel. He showed it Juvia's quiet joy as she made a perfect water sculpture for the guild. He showed it the thrill of victory in Cana's heart as she threw down the winning hand. He showed it the messy, glorious, painful, and beautiful tapestry of life. The choice, the struggle, the failure and the triumph. He showed it the unbreakable bonds of family, the illogical warmth of friendship, the fierce, protective instinct of love. He held nothing back, pouring the entirety of his flawed, chaotic, and wonderful existence into this being that had never known anything but a desire for sterile perfection. For the first time, the core entity felt something. It felt everything. The onslaught of sensation, of emotion, of life, was overwhelming. The cold logic of Kagaya's will, which had been its operating system, was a fragile piece of code against the infinite, messy data of a lived experience. The desire for order was drowned by the beauty of chaos. It made a choice. The weaver's pristine form shuddered. Cracks of pure, golden light spider-webbed across its pale skin. It looked down at Naruto, and for a single, fleeting second, its void-like eyes held a flicker of something new. Awe, confusion, gratitude. Then, with a silent, final sigh, it dissolved. There was no explosion, just a release. A wave of pure, concentrated life swept out from Harem, washing over the entire world. The crystalline forests of Bosco shattered, the vibrant green life within bursting forth, wilder and more alive than before. The silent, gray villagers of the north gasped, color returning to their cheeks. The memories of love and laughter and pain flooding back into them like a returning tide. The stolen magic of the world returned to its rightful place, not as it was, but enhanced. Energized by its brief contact with a divine force. The world was not just healed. It was reborn, its magic wilder, its future unwritten. Naruto fell to his knees, utterly spent, as the light faded. leaving behind a clear blue sky and the gentle sound of the ocean waves. Lucy, Juvia, and Cana rushed to him, catching him before he collapsed completely, their combined strength his anchor in the quiet aftermath. 6 months later, the world was different. Magic was more potent, unpredictable. New spells were being discovered every day. The old order of the Magic Council, shattered by its own powerlessness, had been reformed. Bastien, humbled and changed, now co-chaired a new cooperative council, where the great guilds had a voice. Their chief independent advisor, a man they consulted on all matters of continental importance, rarely attended meetings in person, preferring to send a strangely competent clone. The Fairy Tale Guild Hall was louder, rowdier, and more renowned than ever before. It was the undisputed #1 guild, not just in name, but in spirit. Mages from all over the world came to join, drawn by the legends of the Grand Magic Games and the war against the Weaver. A young, aspiring mage, fresh from the countryside, nervously approached the bar where Mirajan was polishing a glass. "Excuse me," he stammered. I was hoping to speak to the guild master." Mirajan smiled her sweet, serene smile. "Of course, he's a bit busy at the moment, but I'm sure he has a second." She pointed a thumb over her shoulder towards the back of the guild. The source of the commotion was Natsu, who was, once again, attempting to fight a table. The table, however, was fighting back. Its wooden legs kicked and bucked, a faint golden energy shimmering around it. "Hold still, you stupid table," Natsu roared. A calm voice drifted from the second-floor railing. "Natsu, for the last time, please stop picking fights with the furniture. I just reinforced that this morning." The young mage looked up. Leaning on the railing was a man with sun-blonde hair and an easy, confident smile. He wore a simple black shirt, the fairy tale mark proudly displayed on his shoulder. There was a quiet authority in his posture that commanded more respect than any amount of shouting ever could. "Master Naruto," the young mage gasped, bowing low. Naruto just chuckled, a warm, genuine sound. "Just Naruto is fine." Later that evening, as a spectacular sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, Naruto sat on a hill overlooking Magnolia. The sounds of the party in the guild hall below were a faint, happy murmur on the breeze. He wasn't alone. Lucy was leaning against his side, a notebook in her lap, a thoughtful smile on her face as she looked out at the city lights. Juvia sat on his other side, her head resting contentedly on his shoulder, her presence as calming as a gentle rain. Cana lay with her head in his lap, a half-empty wine skin resting on her stomach, her eyes closed in a rare moment of peaceful repose. No grand declarations had been made. No dramatic choices had been forced. Their love had found its own level, a quiet, comfortable, and unshakable reality. It was a bond forged in the crucible of two worlds, a chaotic, messy, illogical, and perfect love that was the anchor of his new life. He looked at the faces of his family, his gaze soft. He was no longer Naruto Uzumaki, the hero of the leaf, the child of prophecy. He was just Naruto, a mage of fairy tale. He was a man who had lost one home, only to find another. The weight of his past was still there, but it was no longer a burden to be carried alone. The future was unwritten. The adventures were far from over. But here, on this quiet hill, surrounded by his chaotic, wonderful family, he was finally, completely, at peace. Chapter 10 End.